Hello, romance lovers. Today's story is called I Will Change the Destiny of Being Executed. If you enjoy our videos, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss out on more exciting stories. The deep, dark night sank over the walls of the ancient royal palace. The rising moon illuminated him with the walls that had been eagerly from time to time. The sky, dotted with bright stars, covers it with a soft blanket. The lively daytime life in the palace faded quietly. This was her first night as a hereditary princess of the kingdom. The difficult today is finally over. She has become the wife of the crown prince today. Thoughts did not allow the girl to fall asleep for a long time, but over time she managed to do this. Unfortunately, her dream was short-lived. Opening her eyes wide, she was surprised at the loud scream that woke her. The girl's heart trembled in her chest. She was excited by the thoughts that something could happen at so later time. Having stood on her bed, she saw her maid, which clamped her mouth with her hand. In the eyes of her maids, dumb horror froze. Association, the girl could not understand what happened, and she asked the maid what kind of screams she woke her. Without hearing anything back, she asked the maid about what happened. No one answered her, already starting to wake up from sleep. The girl realized that the maid woke her with her screams. The princess asked her the following question. What caused her such loud cries? The maid, numb with horror, could not utter a word. Words stuck in her throat. Only with a look she was able to show her mistress on her hand, who was lying on the hem of her dress. Looking in the direction indicated by the maid, the girl with horror found a bloodied dagger in her hand. The princess's gaze froze in surprise and horror. What could happen to her on this fatal night? She perfectly remembered everything that happened to her until that moment. She remembered the moment when she fell asleep with a strong sleep, but she could not remember how this bloodied dagger appeared in her hand. The next thought that the princess visited was the idea of whose blood is on the weapon blades. Who could become her victim? The girl perfectly understood that she could not become a killer. She quickly tried to analyze all the circumstances of this situation. She had not yet seen behind her the bloodied body of her newly acquired spouse. Suddenly, again, following the gaze of her maid, the girl wrapped her head and saw the bloodied body of the crown prince lying behind me. He lay behind her, wide his arms and legs. He was definitely dead. All the prince's clothes and the sheet around his body were sprayed with his own blood. In the princess, the thought of what happened here did not give rest. Who could become a killer of her newly minted husband, and who put the gun of the murder of her hands? Suddenly, the prince's eyes were opened for a moment, and he whispered her name quietly. Then, from his mouth with a stream of glass, blood, and it calmed down forever. The horror of what happened did not leave the girl. She could not understand how all this happened. It seemed to her impossible that she could kill the crown prince. The thought of this did not give the girl peace. Did she really become a killer? Although the prince was not the best person, he did not deserve death from her hand. Since she became the chosen one of the young prince and settled in the palace, she did not receive anything good from him. Their marriage was not at all a marriage for love. Most likely, the prince could not have that. His life was determined by the interests of the state, which he had to begin to rule over time. Since the engagement time, the prince refused to give the girl any attention signs to the girl. He constantly avoided his bride. It got to the point that he even ordered her not to touch him in a case. The life of the future princess in the palace turned into a real hell. Her future husband was not at all as a person as she represented him before meeting him. Nothing interested a young man except himself and his own interests. Only his family members could avoid his merciless attitude. He seemed to despise his future bride. The prince was constantly looking for the opportunity not to be with his future wife. To do this, he used any causes and excuses. If it happened that he spoke to her, then he always spoke cruelly and never smiled at her. Loneliness has become a girl's eternal companion in the palace. The life of the future wife of the crown prince became unbearable in the palace. Her future husband constantly ignored her, and if he was with her, he tried to humiliate her and insult her. There were times when she regretted that she became his bride, but unfortunately she had to fulfill her duty to the family and society. At that moment, when the girl was especially difficult, she recalled her own family. The future princess represented the faces of her parents and brother, who were very proud of her. They were very glad that the choice fell on their relative. And even more, the girl wanted to become a princess whom the people would love. But unfortunately, everything went completely different from how she imagined and how she sometimes planned. This bloody night turned her life in the completely opposite direction. Instead of being in the royal chambers, she ended up in the dark royal prison. She was accused of killing the crown prince. Instead of a luxurious royal dress decorated with gilding and diamonds, dark, heavy, rough clothes were dressed on it. Instead of wide stained glass windows, she saw a small, barred, dirty window. The bed served her by a wooden one in no way covered in the trestle. The girl's luxurious hair for a couple of days did not remember touching the comb. Beniti, and that was the name of our main heroine, could not sleep, neither day nor at night. The food brought to her also did not climb into the throat, and what was brought to her with a stretch could be called food, which she was used to eating earlier. She was haunted by the thought of why she was accused of killing the prince. After all, she did not. Suddenly, someone who called her by name brought her voice out of deep thought. Until that time, no one visited her except strict guards. They treated her with extreme cruelty in view of the fact that she became the killer of their future ruler. The appearance of the visitor was very surprised by the prisoner, in the failed princess who came to recognize her best friend. Almost crying from a date with a loved one, she was delighted that at least someone had to come to her. To make sure that this was not fated by the girl, she turned to her friend and asked if she was. A girlfriend imprisoned in the prisoner of the girl was called Rosalie. She was one of the court ladies at the royal palace. Girls, acquaintances, and before became very friends recently. The one who came held a basket in her hand, covered with a napkin. She asked the princess if everything was in order. Already by the appearance of the prisoner, one could understand that not everything is in order with her. A couple of days ago, a beautiful face turned into a terrible mask. The lack of sleep and food, as well as the thoughts oppressive to her soul, aged a girl for a couple of decades. The princess complained to her friend that no one was listening to her, and she was not at all to blame for what she was accused of. The girl told her that she could not remember anything since she went to bed. She just drank the wine that maid of honor gave her. And then a deep dream was silent, and only the cries of the maid brought her out of it. The sympathetic friend asked the girl, was she not hungry? The prisoner guessed what was stored in her friend in a basket. She pulled a napkin from her and took out something wrapped in paper. She said that this was a sandwich made by her own hands and began to stretch it towards the iron grill, which was between two friends. Hoping that she will receive from her friend the usual food, the girl was very happy. Communication with a person close to her aroused feelings of hunger in her. In addition, she was intrigued by the smell of a sandwich brought. How, it turns out, it was very hungry. Girlfriends looked into each other's eyes through the iron lattice separating them. When Beniti was ready to grab the bundle offered to her, he fell out of his hand under his hand. A wrapped in paper, a sandwich, fell soundly onto the stone floor of a prison prisoner. The echo from his fall flashed loudly under the ceiling of the dungeon. Looking into the eyes of her friend, the prisoner did not notice a drop of regret in them about what had happened. Judging and rejoicing, she stepped on a sandwich with a boot and crushed it with the sole. The smell from him spread through the cell. The princess watched in surprise how her friend brutally treats her food brought for her. The girl was terribly surprised by the behavior of her friend. She could not understand why she did it. Therefore, she turned to Rosalie and asked what she did and why. She suddenly thought that her friend was crazy. Looking at her friend, she saw an evil smile on her skewed lips. In her eyes, feelings of malice and hatred were replaced by an evil mockery. The prisoner realized that her friend was glad of the situation. Looking for a long time at the prisoner and triumphing in the soul, finally, who came, loudly laughed. Her laughter was heard loudly under the arches of a high prison chamber. To the surprise of the princess, she said that she was very pleased to look at the girl in a place that she was supposed to be the very beginning. Finally, now I will get a worthy place. If you only knew how disgusting I was to listen to your complaints. That you didn't like your situation at all. I hope you like your current situation much more, Rosalie said with anger in his voice. The princess was surprised to watch the face of her girlfriend's skewed anger through the prison bars. She did not understand the reasons for such a reaction of her ex-friend. She did not understand what she was to blame for that and why she was happy with her misfortune. Approaching, As far as possible, the princess's friend whispered to the bars that she now realizes that all this was worth it. And then she added that she had been waiting for this for so long. Finally, all this ended successfully for her. The girl listened silently to her, analyzing every saying word. The poor prison prisoner could not understand what her ex-girlfriend was talking about. Picking his fists to pain, she could not imagine what she could do. Doomed to fast execution, shouted to her friend and asked what she had done. In response, a girl with red hair answered her that she was to blame for herself in everything that had happened. She deserved with all her behavior that she was waiting for her very soon. Very soon it will be taken to the central square of the city and executed there. The poor princess became terribly from these words. She took her spirit from the unexpected recognition of the one that she considered her best friend. The same, in turn, as it was, continued and said that she would suffer for a long time and die in terrible torment. Then, with a malicious mockery on his lips and a voice that was full of hatred, the one who came to say that the prisoner enjoy the sandwich. After these words, she once again stepped on his boots with a heel. On a sandwiched sandwich. The gloating girl still could not calm down and tried how much bile could be poured with her snake tongue. Smiling in the end, she said that she was very pleased to know that the last dinner of the young girl was made precisely by her hands, and also crushed by her foot. Beniti, as annoyed by the words that her guest uttered, could not hide her disappointment and fear. Grabbing with his own hands by the iron grate and clinging to it with cold cheeks, the girl asked to answer what happened to her parents. She was scared by the unknown. In response, the outgoing girl did not even bother to turn her head in her direction. She was not going to answer the question posed to her. She was pleased that her former best friend is now in a dark, cold chamber. Well, she strove for this. So everything was conceived. Then, for a moment, the guest stopped as if thinking about something for a long time. She wanted to even more painfully prick the poor, exhausted prisoner of the royal prison. With a contemptuous smile, she turned back and told the girl that she would soon find out what had happened to her relatives. Thus, the former failed princess was where she was now. With tied hands and kneeling in the middle of a scaffold, she waited for the royal execution. From all sides, there were cries of commoners who demanded to quickly get rid of the princess who killed the crown prince. They called her a witch and demanded to cut her throat. The girl doomed to death could not calmly listen to all this. Thoughts wounded in her head with a whirlwind. In order not to be afraid of execution, she would try to find the reasons why she was here. Who was the enemy who condemned her to the right destruction? After all, her ex-friend was a simple girl and could not turn this alone. She did not understand who in the palace she was able to annoy in such a short time. She tried to maintain warm, friendly relations with everyone. No one could complain about her unworthy attitude towards herself. With a mouth tied with a rope, she wanted to ask why she was punished. The girl wanted to close her ears with her hands so as not to hear screams from the crowd, which were filled with anger and hatred for her. But her hands were also tied. In order not to see people who burned with hatred, she lowered her eyes down to the foot of the scaffold. There was a wagon covered with a canvas. Screams with the requirement to immediately execute the girl became louder and intolerant. The poor, doomed girl was preparing for death. The executioner was also ready to fulfill his duty. She had to live some few moments. The last preparations for the execution of the princess were going on. The assistant executioner also did not sit idle. He got down from the scaffold and went to the cart standing nearby. Then he pulled the cover of the bedspread, and from under the other, someone's legs were shod and boots appeared. A few more appeared behind one foot. Silent horror held the girl when her eyes opened the whole wagon, with which the assistant executioner pulled the cover covered with fresh blood. The princess recognized the bodies of deciduous people who lay in front of her in the wagon of the executioner. At first, she saw a hand on which there was a family ring of their family. This hand, like the body of the 3 victims of the executioner, was covered with dark baked blood. Then, in the corner, not far away, the girl saw the heads of 3 decapitated. Her eyes opened an ear from one of the victims on which there was an earring of her mother. The eyes of the next victim of the royal executioner were filled with cold horror. She just realized that before she had lost her whole family. Tears of regret flowed from her eyes with a stream. She became scared from the fact that she would never see her parents and brother happy again. Before her eyes arose the faces of the living brother, father, and mother. The girl looked down at the bodies of her dead relatives. She thought that this was the last time they were so close to each other. She really wanted to stretch out her hands forward and touch them with her hands. The memories of the happy former life arose before the eyes of the girl's young, sentenced to death. Her family has always been very difficult and kind. With warmth, she remembered the minutes of happiness in the family circle. What a pity that this can never repeat with her again. The girl did not look forward from the height of the royal scaffold. So this was what her friend betrayed when she said that she soon learns about the fate of her relatives. The princess thought that now her life was not at all sweet to her and prepared for the minute of death. She was prevented from concentrating from where different thoughts climbed into her head. Widely opened in the eyes, she thought about what her family was guilty of, that she was so punished. As a result of her crime imperfect, the whole innocent family of the girlfriend suffered. The leisurely steps of the royal executioner were heard from behind. Boards of scaffold creaked under his feet. The girl felt the executioner's sword cuts the air that whistles inexorable whistle over her head. Putting her hands in front of her in prayer, the girl began to wait for the outcome of the inexorable for her. She was mentally ready for death. The only thing that kept her in this world was her relatives, but now they were forced to leave this world by the will of the king. The same fate was waiting for the poor princess. When death inexorably began to approach her, the girl for a moment recalled what happened to her during her stay in a prison cell. In her head arose a memory of notes. Behind all these experiences about the fate of relatives, she completely forgot about them. At the time of the execution, the princess remembered another visitor who came to her in a dark prison camera. When her position seemed to her already completely hopeless and no one had to seek help, a completely unexpected guest came to her. She was visited by the sister of the murdered prince. Before the very execution of the girl, the princess came to the prison. She told her that there was very little time left and she should act very quickly. The girl asked the prisoner to listen very carefully and do what she would offer her. Because a few hours remained before her execution, it is very important. Then the princess handed a scroll with some papers through an iron lattice to the girl. As she explained to the girl, on those sheets there were notes of the song. It was necessary to sing this song during her execution. The princess hoped that these notes could become a salvation for the innocently accused. Then she talked about the purpose of these mysterious notes. His Highness, the deceased brother of the princess, and they were given by a witch. She told him that this subject could change the unfair fate. It will be necessary to sing this song during the execution, but it is very important not to make a mistake if you want to turn the time back. Holding the scroll with notes in the girl's hand, the princess once again asked her to be precise and attentive to singing the song in time. She, with tears in her eyes, begged the girl not to forget to sing this song when the sword of an unjust executioner rises above her head. And now, kneeling with tied hands, the girl remembered the promise given to her, the princess. Overcoming pain and pity over herself, she began to sing a song she learned over the previous night. Singing the motive of this song, she imagined that everything that is happening to her now was just a dream. She thought that if she had been born again, she would never have lived her life in this way. She would certainly make every effort so that her relatives remain intact and sound. Meanwhile, bloodthirsty cries from the surrounding scaffold of the crowd became louder and more disgusting. People to whom she did nothing bad in life demanded as soon as possible to execute her. They came here to see the suffering of a young princess. Beniti really wanted the song that she sang help her stay alive. The rag, which was connected by her mouth, very interfered with singing. But still the girl tried to sing as louder as possible, not missing a single word from the text. She did not want to become a victim of betrayal. Before the eyes of the princesses began to fly to the events of her life. At first she saw the spinning on the floor and the bloody body of her husband. Then it was replaced by a vision of the one that betrayed her. The girl clearly saw the face of her friend, who was so happy about her upcoming death, and who had a hand in her unjust accusation. The next thing that the dying princess saw was the bloody hand of her mother with a family ring hanging from the wagon of the royal executioner. She experienced all the events, as if in a terrible dream. It seemed to her that the world became completely different and she falls into hell. From the pain and the feeling of an unjust punishment, the girl screamed very much. She mentally ordered herself to wake up immediately. The girl opened her eyes and saw that she was lying in her own bed in her father's house. She was trembling with an experienced nightmare. The eyes were tearful after long sobs. Her new life, presented by notes, began. Beniti woke up from the loud scream of her maid. She opened her eyes, recalling her recent nightmare. Was it all just a dream? Tears flowed down the eyes of the girl and her cheeks. She could not calm down and calm them down. The girl continued to lie, staring with her own eyes in the ceiling. To her relief and indescribable happiness, she recognized these arches of the room well. She was now in her favorite bed in the house of her parents. The girl wanted to know if she had a dream, or she really was able to escape thanks to notes, and she moved back to her past. She thought that in order to make sure of this, it would be necessary for a while. It will be necessary to be very attentive to the details. To the girl who continued to lie on her bed, the maid turned with the question of how she feels. In the house, everyone is very worried about the fact that she did not come to life for a long time. Even more were all the same due to the fact that they thought that she could never wake up again. The girl still could not believe in the reality of what happened to her. Now in front of her was her old maid, her beloved maid, who was called Tasha. She did not stop and tried to tell her mistress about what happened in the house during the time that she was unconscious. Still lying on the bed, the girl began to think. It seemed that all the latest events that the maid told her confirmed that the notes were able to save her. All events looked very real and were confirmed by her memories from the past. She really managed to escape. Not remembering herself from joy and happiness, the girl jumped up, ran up to her maid, and hugged her neck greatly. Thanks to the notes brought by the princess, she was able to escape from the inevitable death at the hands of the royal executioner. And now she will be. You should behave like that so as not to repeat the mistakes of the past. The maid, squeezed by her mistress in the arms, could not say a word. She thought that she could make such an impression on her mistress. She had never before expressed her feelings for her thus. The girl continued to cling to the body of a stunned maid. She hanged herself with her whole body on her neck and asked to confirm that it was just a bad dream, and she had all this. The poor maid could not understand what happened to her poor mistress. She saw tears on her cheeks, and she was not aware that she could cause such a reaction of her mistress. She asked the girl if I had a nightmare. In response, she pondered the question posed to her for a long time. She herself wanted to believe that it was just a nightmare. Provided by such a thought, the girl was significantly cheerful. She stared into the eyes of her maid and agreed that perhaps she had only a terrible dream. Suddenly, some noise came from behind the door. Someone was clearly in a hurry to break into her bedroom. Then they both heard that someone loudly calls a young mistress by name. Then suddenly the door opened sharply, and a breathless young man ran into the room. He quickly ran into the room and, restoring his breath, asked the girl if she had already woke up. And when it happened, the lady who stood next to her maid could not say a word. It seemed that she seemed to be numb at the sight of her brother. She was dumbfounded, as if after she met the ghost. All the same in surprise, she peered into the face of the young man and could not say a word. For a long time, peering into him, she again saw a young man in front of her, lying in the wagon of the executioner. Finally, making sure that she was standing in front of her, still a living brother, the girl with all her legs rushed to him and hanged herself on the neck of the surprised young man. She greeted him with a joyful cry. The young man, as before the maid, could not understand the reasons for such a violent expression of feelings. Therefore, he turned to the maid to give an explanation regarding the behavior of his sister. Brother asked the girl to calm down. He said that he was very worried about her health because he was told that most recently she had unsuccessfully fell from a horse. The girl, hearing his words, again went into her thoughts. She began to recall the fall from the horse, and nothing occurred to her. Brother, feeling something was wrong, asked if everything was in order with her. He knelt at her leg and began to examine her. The girl's ankle was tied with tight bandages. At the same time, the maid tried to explain the unusual behavior of her mistress. She decided that she slept for a long time after falling. And so the lady dreamed of a nightmare. Beniti still continued to think about what she heard from her brother and from the maid. It seemed strange to her that they talked about the fall from the horse. She seemed to have a very similar fact in her life. When the girl was 17 years old, she rode a horse. By her negligence, she unsuccessfully fell from her and dislocated an ankle. The girl began to recall the events that followed her fall. At the same time, she was chosen as a candidate for the bride of the crown prince. She needed to find confirmation of her thoughts. She began to rush around the room and finally found confirmation in the calendar. Now everything became clear to her. Thanks to the notes, one returned a week ago to her past. Again, Having analyzed all the events and facts, the girl realized that thanks to notes, she was able to return to the past. So the princess did not deceive her? Or was it just a bad dream? No, it was little like a dream. With all her feelings, she felt that she was able to return to the past and received a chance to change something in the fate of her relatives and herself. Again, like in reality, she heard the whistle of the sword brought by the executioner above her head. It could not be a dream. She survived all this. Like your death. The girl understood that everything that happened to her before was real. She was really sentenced to death. But thanks to the intervention of the princess, the notes of the witches gave her a chance to change fate. Then the girl tried to understand how these notes found themselves at the prince. Perhaps he knew what was supposed to happen. The girl was confused in her thoughts. The girl could not understand the motives of the prince's actions. What could have encouraged this, in her opinion, bad person to help her? How could he know that everything would happen as this happened? Thoughts did not give rest to a young girl. Again and again, she returned in her thoughts in those days that were in front of her death penalty. She could not understand and forgive the reason for betrayal to her best friend. What could encourage her to oppose? And how was she involved in her imaginary crimes? Once Rosalie was her best friend. The girl considered her only her real friend. She did not understand why she decided to help someone substitute her and betrayed her. After all, she remembered that they spent so well together all their free time. They could share with each other their favorite, most cherished secrets. Each of them rejoiced at the success of the other, as its own. And suddenly, everything could change like that, and her friend became her worst enemy. From thoughtful, the girl was revealed by someone's shout. Someone loudly called her by name. Well, she will return to her thoughts a little later. The brother, who still continued to inspect his leg, asked the girl if she hit her head, because she was thinking for a very long time. It seemed to him that her thoughts were hovering somewhere in the clouds. When she answered him that nothing special, just trifles, her brother advised her to go to bed and rest. When she was already ready to agree with him and lie down, she suddenly remembered her parents. The brother noticed that they were also very worried about their daughter's injury. The excited girl quickly asked her brother where her parents are now. He replied that now they are talking with a doctor on the street near the house. Having decided that she needs to urgently see them, the girl looked out the window, whether her parents are still there. How stupid was she that she forgot about her own father and mother? Having run up to the window, she saw her father and mother peacefully talking about something with their attending physician. It seems that the girl was the topic of their conversation. The doctor said something, and his father and mother listened carefully to him. Looking at the faces of the parents, the girl realized that they cared about her and worried about her state of health. Suddenly, a scream fell from the lips of an excited girl. She decided that it was necessary to welcome them in exactly the same way as she greeted her brother. She wanted to make sure they are intact and healthy. The young mistress's brother cried piercingly. After her recent action, he seriously worried about the state of her health. She never did this before. The girl jumped out the window and quickly ran to the target. She saw this goal in front of herself and did not want to lose sight of. The girl's goal was her mother. Without losing a minute after jumping out the window, the girl barefoot ran towards her parents. She did not even feel the injections of sharp stones under her feet. As soon as possible, she wanted to snuggle up to her relatives. In the eyes of her father, the girl saw excitement for herself. It was noticeable that he was completely incomprehensible to such wonderful changes in the behavior of his own daughter. It was something new in the behavior of his reasonable daughter. She quickly ran to her father, grabbed his neck, and hung on his shoulders. The Duke was stunned by such a rapid appearance of his daughter in the courtyard of the house. He could hardly come to his senses and ask the girl what happened to her. She was only silent in response, pressing her face to her father's chest. She wanted to cry with happiness that she again saw the alive of her parents. Stunned by the behavior of her daughter, the mother began to turn loudly to her with the question, which prompted her daughter to behave in such a strange way. The doctor also noticed that it is unacceptable after her injury to run along the lawn in barefoot. While the girl could not leave her father alone, her mother approached them and turned to her with the question, could the Duke's daughter run barefoot in the garden? This is completely unacceptable for the girl of her position. Mother added that she also has an injury. It is not known how this can then affect the girl's health. In response, rejoicing in the presence of living parents, the girl could not answer. She held out her hand to her mother with the desire to hug her and snuggle up to her with her whole body, and the mother happily imprisoned her daughter in her strong arms. The Duchess could not calm down all, seeing her daughter in this state. She turned to her with the question that this could have happened, that she behaves in such an unusual way. In the arms of her mother, the girl began to cry. She could not explain to her the reason for her strange behavior. Therefore, she referred to the fact that she was very scared. The daughter apologized to her parents. She was very sorry that she so upset them. She promised from now on not to do anything like that. In response, her father asked her when she was already growing up. Beniti remembered that such a conversation was already between her and her parents. Last time, she promised to grow up as soon as possible. And now she repeated her promise again. When everyone calmed down a little, his father raised his daughter in his arms and began to lead her to the house. At this time, she indulged in her thoughts and constructions of plans for the near future. A picture of a previous life appeared in front of her. In that life, the crown prince was cold and cruel with a girl. She wanted to take control of this life. She was not going to be a miserable bride of Karzan anymore. The girl planned to change everything in her newly acquired life. She will need to fix everything, as the princess asked her. And then her family will remain alive. The tireless Tasha brought for her lady. The young mistress sat on her, and together they went to the house. The girl definitely had to relax a bit from all the unrest experienced. Her parents were already a little calmed down, and also a restless brother continued to watch their trip to the house. Everything seems to be settled. Thanking the maid for everything, the girl was about to close in her room and engage in drawing up plans for the future. Her plans included salvation from the death of her family. It was necessary to prevent the upcoming tragedy in any way. Complete determination, Beniti sat on its bed and made up its following steps to achieve goals. No one should get away from her punishment. Everyone will definitely answer for everything. In addition, she was going to find those who wanted to get rid of her family. Inevitable punishment awaited them. Not yet knowing how, she was going to take revenge on everyone. Now it was necessary to prepare for the selection of the bride of the crown prince. According to the plan she had drawn up, the girl was going to go to the city. On the road, she reflected on how the bride's elections were taking place. When the prince is going to marry from all over the country, they collect many girls from prestigious families. All of them are collected together in the royal palace. The qualified commission conducts a very thorough selection of all the gathered potential brides. As a result of the selection, only the 3 most suitable are left. But this still does not end. As a result, only one girl of the 3 chosen ones becomes the bride of the prince. She then has to properly prepare for the performance of her duties. 2 more years of special education of the bride of the crown prince should take place. Then, at the end of the educational program, she marries the prince at 20. After the wedding, the girl enters the Ruby Palace, which is their common residence with the prince. This was the path of becoming a crown princess. The girl attached to thoughts did not notice how her carriage quickly drove up to the shops in the center of the capital. The footman helped her get out of the crew. She planned to visit several boutiques in the shopping center. She was to properly prepare for the upcoming selection of the crown princess. After all, after 2 days, the ceremony of the selection of candidates was supposed to begin. She needed to prepare for her fully armed. Beniti approached the door of trading boutiques. She was going to visit one of them, who belonged to a fashion designer named Mariana. Mariana Isabel was famous as the best fashion designer and designer throughout the empire. This boutique was considered one of the largest boutiques of their capital and empire. He was the most popular among the nobility of the city. Therefore, a lot of people served in it. And now, noticing the incoming guest, the maid turned to her. The young Duchess Gordia entered the boutique door. In front of her, local maids lined up on both sides of the path. Everyone was ready to help her choose the upcoming outfit. The girl asked one of the maids. She asked her to help her find a dress for the selection ceremony of the bride of the crown prince. She happily agreed and said that she had to call the mistress of the boutique. Now she is a little busy with her own business, but he should soon be freed. The young duchess was offered to drink tea. Sitting on the couch, she had to wait until the designer was released. Waiting time was completely imperceptible to the girl. As usual, she indulged in her plans. The girl planned to choose a dress for herself for a ceremony that would be significantly different from the outfits of those present on her. She set out to stun everyone. Then a designer appeared in the room and greeted the young duchess. She told the girl that they saw her only a year ago, and during this time the mistress grew up very much. She turned into a real beauty. The girl also said that she remembers her previous visit to the designer. She and her mother then went to her mansion. She really liked the outfits from this couturier, and she would love to look something new. Mariana said that he would definitely try to choose something suitable for the young Duchess. She seems to have a couple of dresses suitable for her. The girl agreed to look at everything proposed by the designer. To the words of the one that they had almost finished for a girl to sew a dress for the ceremony, she said that she would see him later. No need to bring it. Then she added a surprised woman that she did not need it. Therefore, it is necessary to immediately suspend sewing the dress, which was previously intended for the selection ceremony of the bride of the crown prince. The designer asked the girl if she wanted to take something for herself personally. She just had a couple of excellent dresses. But unfortunately, she will not be able to fulfill her request to stop sewing her dress. The upset young Duchess heard that she would not be able to fulfill her request. The designer told her that this is the order of her mother of the Duchess, and they cannot break the deal with her. She laughed deliberately. The girl replied that then let her continue to sew a dress for her. She thought that one of the points of the plan would have to be corrected. Continuing to drink tea, the girl told the designer that she would not wear this dress, but she was not going to argue with her mother either. Let her think that her daughter will put on the ceremony. This is exactly the dress they ordered before. The designer began to select suitable words to answer a young girl. She said that she did not think that Miss was so stubborn. She should think well about the choice of dress. As she knows, other candidates already have elegant dresses. Then the designer added that it will be very difficult to do something better than they ordered before. Her buyer asked to show her something more fashionable and modern. The girl wanted to differ from everyone who will attend the selection of the prince's bride. While the designer thought that she could offer this girl, she took up thoughts. She was going to choose the most elaborate dress. And if it also turned out to be tasteless, it would be the limit of the dreams of a young duchess. But this was not necessary to know the couturier about this. When asked by the designer about how she wants to put on a pretentious dress on the upcoming ceremony, the girl nodded in the affirmative and laughed. Yes, in her opinion, it was so that it should have been. Another added that, moreover, this outfit must be catchy. Everyone around should pay attention to the dress and the girl dressed in her. She was going to impress everyone with her appearance. The girl's choice was immediately presented by several deserves on her, according to the designer outfits. But unfortunately, none of them could satisfy her exquisite taste. When it seemed that her plans were not destined to come true again, and she could not find an outfit suitable for the ceremony, the girl noticed a hidden, suitable dress in the depths. Her eyes sparkled with an unexpected find. With a happy look, she asked the designer as the name she liked. It seemed to her that this was exactly what she was looking for. It looked charming. The designer thought a little and then said that the dress is called the Golden Wave. But in her opinion, this will not be a very suitable outfit for the selection ceremony of the bride of the crown prince. It seems to her that the girl should still think. But the young duchess did not want to hear any objections. It was exactly what she had been looking for so long. This outfit should become a suitable weapon for the ceremony. She told the designer that this dress takes. When the purchase ended, the girl said goodbye to the designer and her maids. Leaving the boutique, she felt completely satisfied. Her mother, of course, will scream for a long time when she finds out what exactly she put on the ceremony. But by that time, the ceremony will end. Everything will be decided, as I want a young duchess. The girl turned back for a moment, noticed the gaze of a fashionable designer on herself. It seemed to her that in the eyes of a woman there was some shade of a cunning. The duchess began to peer into the face and eyes of a woman who escorted her from the boutique. Turning back again ago, the girl looked and thought that perhaps she just seemed to her. The designer looked now as usual. Perhaps this was just the gaze of the seller, who was grateful for the purchase in her store. The duchess thought that everything would be fine. A clear, sunny, and warm day in the ducal house preserved complete silence. Everyone was busy with their usual things. Nothing could disturb the rest of the young duchess. She made the latest preparations for the selection ceremony of the crown princess. Suddenly, the crushed maid, who was announced by an inhuman cry, turning to his mistress. Seeing something unusual in the window, she wanted to share with her young mistress and asked the one, "Did she see this?" Then the maid informed the young duchess that she had come for her. The imperial family sent a carriage to them in which they had to go to the upcoming ceremony. The girl went to the window to also look at the crew who arrived. A tirelessly dangling maid told her that the ceremony would begin soon. She was so interested in what it was like to go in a carriage in which the emperor and his family drives. The young duchess stubbornly and sullenly was silent in response. She plunged into her gloomy thoughts. It was difficult for the girl to remember how many misfortunes awaited her ahead after a trip in the imperial carriage. While her lady looked out the window and thought about something of her own, the maid did not get tired of admiring the appearance of the carriage. She looked just amazing in her opinion. How she also wanted to see her inner decoration. Finally, her young lady enjoyed the contemplation of the carriage and turned to her with the question, why was she so happy? She replied that she was very happy for her mistress, who will now visit the king's palace. Well, at least someone was happy for her. Unfortunately, the girl was not at all pleased with the prospect of visiting the imperial palace. She knew that there was nothing good there. From the surging memories, the girl was forced to clench her fingers into a fist. Once again, looking at her maid, the duchess, thought that it was good that at least someone rejoices at the events. She herself had absolutely no reason for joy. She was well known from the past visit to the palace that for her family it would have very deplorable consequences. She could not share her memories with a dumb maid. Dreamily raising her head up, the girl informed the stunned maid that she would also go to her to the imperial palace. She will accompany her during the trip. It was necessary to see the face of a poor maid at that moment. Smiling at her, the girl said that, of course, they would go together. She could not go to the imperial palace, not taking her best girlfriend with her. Or maybe she was going to go there without her lady. In response, the grateful and not feeling with her legs, the maid replied that she was very grateful to her mistress for the honor. One will be happy to accompany her and stay with her nearby while visiting the palace. From such unexpectedly breaking on her head, the maid was in a sense of euphoria. She, without silent, chips with her mistress. How she was going to get into the imperial palace for the first time. Hearing the last phrase, the young duchess noted for herself that the maid did not remember the last time she was in the palace, but she remembered that visit in her in a past life. The girl remembered that the last time she and the maid had their best clothes. Last time she and the servant first visited the city. Therefore, they tried to see everything and excitedly examined the entire district. The girl left only the best memories of that walk. But today, everything should have been different. The young duchess treated her maid and said that she would have a rather unusual request for her. She should not be surprised and implicitly fulfill what she has ordered. A surprised maid heard from her mistress that she needed to dress in her most battered and old clothes. That will be her order. In response to the maid's question, do not need to dress in the best, namely battered clothes, the girl was forced to upset her maid and said that yes, that should be. Then the young duchess continued and said with her stunned by such news of the maid that you need to dress the most ugly clothes that she only has. The maid continued to stand in front of her mistress, unable to budge. It seems that she did not like the idea of dressing in the worst clothes at all. Then, in the end, the maid gathered her thoughts and told her mistress that this would not work at all. She did not want to be dressed in some kind of outline. The young duchess was surprised why the maid so do not want to fulfill her request. The maid's voice trembled with excitement. She said that if she dresses as her lady asks, the other maids would look at her high. Then the maid added that she could survive everything for the sake of her mistress. But it will also be a shame for the duchess itself. By her maid will judge herself, the girl thought. She could not foresee this at all. She did not want her former girlfriend to suffer from her idea. The idea of a young duchess was to look as extravagant and ignorantly as possible. She also planned to wear her maid as an ordinary beggar, but I completely forgot that that one can have their own feelings. The girl would never have thought that her maid could be so stubborn. Having decided to adhere to her plan, the girl said that the maid should just fulfill her order, because there is a reason for this. But how difficult it was for a young duchess to convince his stubborn maid. She continued to repeat that this was impossible because there would be other maids. For that, among these maids will be her friend, who will not miss the case of pricking her. The maid could not calm down and gave her arguments in favor of new and neat clothes. She did not want someone to discuss and spoke badly about her mistress. Then she said that among those who will definitely be on the selection of a crown princess, there will be one familiar maid. She will definitely discuss both the mistress and her maid. It seems that they had their own personal scores. Thinking, the girl agreed with her maid. She decided that there was nothing to be done and informed the maid that she could choose her best clothes. Satisfied with the positive decision for herself, Mrs. the maid cried out loudly with joy. She immediately thanked her and said that now she could completely count on her, and in no case will she shame her during the selection of the crown princesses. The maid said that she was running to change clothes and at the same moment disappeared from her field of view. The girl thought that it was just unimaginable how quickly the expression on her maid's face could change. Both girls left their native ducal house and headed for the imperial carriage waiting for them. The young duchess strictly ordered her maid in no case to lose his suitcase with things. A curious girl did not fail the opportunity to look into the suitcase in her hand. Seeing another dress there, she asked her mistress, why did she need replaceable clothes? Without going into details, the young mistress replied that she would learn about everything a little later. She smiled and said that she wanted to arrange a little surprise. When both girls were ready to step on the step of the carriage, someone called them from behind. When they turned towards the cried them, they saw that the duchess was approaching them. The worried woman approached them and asked her daughter if she wanted her mother to go with her to the imperial palace. She was afraid that the girl could not cope without her. Her daughter, in response, laughed merrily and said that, of course, she would cope, because she was already 17 years old. She has already become a real lady. Mother still decided to make her the last instructions before the road. She asked her daughter to be careful and hold on with dignity. With a sweet smile, the girl immediately agreed. Well, in fact, she was not at all going to listen to the advice of her mother, and even wanted to do the opposite. Everything was supposed to happen in a completely different way than happened to the young duchess during her first visit to the imperial court. The duchess looked with excitement into the distance of the carriage moving along the road. Inside the carriage, her daughter was sitting and thought that soon she would have to discard all her dignity. Conveniently settling in a seat in the imperial carriage, the maid immediately began to feel his upholstery with a finger. Then she could not hide her delight and screamed loudly about what kind of soft seat in the carriage of the emperor. The young duchess looked at her maid in surprise. How excited was her maid, as if for the first time had fallen into society. In order to somehow reason that, she pretended that she wanted to fall asleep, yawned and asked the maid to stop behaving in this way. In addition, she also told the maid that she behaves like a real village, which was very angry with an emotional girl. Having calmed down a little, the maid made a thoughtful look and asked the mistress how she looks now. Then she began to sing songs about the unhappy love of princes and princesses. All this cheered up and laughed the duchess. If someone thought at that moment approaching the imperial carriage, he would have heard the rolling sounds of laughter that sounded inside her. When the trip of two girls ended in the end, they were in a huge square in front of the imperial palace. In surprise, the poor maid even opened her mouth. The imperial palace impressed everyone who looked at him with its huge size and exquisite brilliance. He possessed incredible beauty, which was beckoning to himself. Architects worked a lot on the arrangement of the square in front of the palace. Beautiful fountains were built throughout its territory. The space between them was equipped with flower beds with roses from different countries and different varieties. The girls approached the exquisitely decorated gilding front door of the palace. She was incredibly large, as if giants lived in this house. The imperial palace itself appeared as huge before the gaze of the girls. They were fascinated by a multi-story building with a large number of stained glass windows. The duchess did not think that he might be so huge. A large fountain was built right in front of the palace. Water, which was chasing it, reached the level of the second floor of the building. For the first time that appeared here, the maid could not hide her surprise from what she saw. She said that she had never seen such a large fountain. The maid did not cover her mouth for a minute. At the same time, her lady thought that other people would be very surprised when they first saw such a talkative maid. When the girls entered inside, the maid raised her head up and could not hide her screams at the sight of chandeliers, decorating the ceiling of the palace. The young duchess confidently continued her path with palace corridors. She did not slow down her move for a minute. The maid seemed strange that her lady was so confident in such an unfamiliar place. She asked the girl how she knew the way so well if she came here for the first time today. The maid added that her lady moves as if she was often here. In response, the girl said that she would have to learn to be silent. And if she does not do this, she will immediately go back home. The duchess was looking for a place where she could change her. She was well aware of it. In the fifth library of the main palace, mostly philosophical books. Therefore, it is very rarely attended. And then the doors of the fifth library were in front of both girls. It was possible to safely go inside. Seeing how her lady enters the room of some room, the maid froze in fright. She turned to the mistress with the question of what she conceived. In response, the girl took from the hands of a frightened maid suitcase with another dress and asked her to wait here without leaving. She quietly asked the maid to worry about anything and informed her that she would return back soon. The dumbfounded maid remained standing at the door and waiting for her mistress, who retired somewhere deep into the library. The signs of her anxiety and excitement were perfectly noticeable on the maid's face. She was worried about how someone did not see that they were wrapped in deep into the imperial palace without permission. From fear, she did not even pay attention to the decoration of the inner chambers. Suddenly, fear on the maid's face changed real horror when she saw someone's approach. Something or someone scared her very much. In the eyes of the maid froze cold horror from what they saw. What could she see there before? Just like the maid of the Duchess, a couple of people who wandered at the fifth library of the Imperial Palace at that time were surprised. They looked in amazement and indignant, recalling God. Other present wondered who it is. They were also interested in the question, but did she really go crazy? This was precisely the reaction that the young Duchess sought. She really liked that in this way people reacted to her appearance in her new dress. The girl majestically appeared in the dress, which she bought in a boutique secret from her mother. A yellow dress sparkled with an exquisite glitter from the presence of a large number of precious stones. The girl rejoiced at the effect made on people. Now she will be considered the most crazy of all. The maid quickly ran to her mistress and told her that she had two causing dress. If she does not change to what was on her, they will laugh before. In response, the young Duchess laughed and said that her maid did not understand modern fashion at all. She better know what needs to be put on the selection of royal brides. The poor maid continued to insist on her. Your mother, the Duchess ordered you to behave with dignity and elegantly. I still insist that you need to wear the dress in which you arrived in the palace. The answer of the young mistress of his maid seemed that completely crazy. She thought that her lady was crazy. The girl answered her that in this way one could show her dignity to the imperial family. It is the dress that will help her do it. The poor maid was beside herself from everything that was happening. She did not understand what happened to her mistress, who always had such a good taste. To herself at this time, the girl thought that it was good for everyone to notice her now in this dress. She wanted everyone to see her bad taste and poor education. To this end, she was chosen precisely this dress. She hoped that nobody would like decorated with jewelry. It was necessary in order to immediately be excluded from the selection. To do this, the girl brought another dress to the palace and changed clothes in front of the ceremony. It was to cause the exclusion of a young duchess from the competition. And now, in the depths of her soul, the young duchess triumphed. It seems her idea justified herself. Everyone around only discussed her dress and his mistress. The maid approached her mistress to tell her that she has two causing a dress. You cannot appear in this form before the imperial family. In response, the young duchess laughed and said that her maid had nothing to poke her nose in other people's affairs. She is better to do her direct responsibilities. The poor maid did not agree with her mistress. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to be angry with the girl. The answer of the young mistress of his maid seemed that completely crazy. She once again thought that her lady was crazy, and she looked strange. At this time, the girl thought that it was good for everyone to notice her now in this dress. She wanted everyone to see her bad taste and poor education. To this end, it was precisely this dress that was chosen. It was supposed to shine brighter than imperial chandeliers on the ceiling. She hoped that no one would like to deliberately decorate it. Having reassured her maid, the girl went with her to the selection place. She ordered her to calm down and assured her that everything would be fine. The young duchess thought that now it was all that begins. Ahead, she has a real test in which she wanted to be a loser. Now she wished herself in all her soul in the selection of a crown princess. She firmly took two hands by the door handle and boldly pushed her forward in front of her. Entering the hall, the girl decided to well recall everything that happened to her in the previous selection, in which she, in her might, became a winner. The huge room was lit by thousands of chandeliers. Despite the fact that there was a day, dozens of candles were lit in each of the chandeliers. All gilding in the interior of the castle shone from this light. The young duchess quickly descended along the steps of the palace hall. Then she slowed down her gait so that all those present were able to consider her defiant dress well. It seems that she managed to achieve the maximum effect with her dress. When she appeared on the floor of the hall in her decorated dress, all the girls who were present at the selection parted, freeing her path. All eyes were turned towards her shining outfit. The gossip and noise that are ordinary for such a situation began. Each of the girls stunned by her dress wanted to discuss him with her next to her. I did not fail to look at the cause-decorated dress of a young duchess and her once best friend. In her eyes, bewilderment was read. The girl thought that everything was going the best. It was such a reaction that she expected. Her crazy idea was a success. Each of the girls present here asked himself the question of what happened to the young Duchess. Everyone considered her crazy. No one could understand how to put on such a defiant dress on the selection ceremony of a hereditary princess. Then, one of the maids of the Empress appeared in the hall. The Countess stepped forward and announced the arrival of Her Majesty Empress. Everyone froze in a silent expectation. Slowly stepping, the wife of the main person in their state entered the room. Women were very stylishly dressed. Her dress was the exact opposite, the dress of a young and a duchess. Despite her age, the Empress looked very good. She could give her 10 years less than her age. There were no extra jewelry on the woman. All the girls who came to the ceremony bowed in a bow, welcoming their mistress. The Duchess was lucky to be the first in the row to her like. The girl was a lot to know about the Empress. She knew that the Empress was elegant and beautiful. Despite her high status, she behaved very modestly. But certainly she was not merciful. Contrary to her sweet appearance, the Empress was always ready to ask sharp and unpleasant questions. Very lucky would be the one whom she would write into her enemies. The girl was sure that in the hands of the Empress was not a rose, but a pointed dagger. The Empress greeted and loudly said that she was glad to share this beautiful morning with everyone who came. In response, the girl who came to the selection of the girl also greeted their Empress. They publicly stated that they were very glad to see her. It was a great honor for them to contemplate their mistress. The elderly Countess, who was considered the main manager of the selection, went out ahead and announced that all girls should introduce herself in turn. The young Duchess was waiting for her turn to call the Empress her name. She recalled the points of the plan, according to which she was going to act now. Last time, when she was on the selection of crown princesses, she picked up eloquent words, pondering her every word. Now she decided to act completely differently. Having opened her mouth, she began to call her name as louder as possible. Hello, the only daughter of the Reishi family. The name is Beniti Reishi. Hearing her greeting, other girls fell silent from surprise. She said so loudly that they were ready to plug their ears. The strict Countess stared at the girl's face. She was perplexed about such a short and loud greeting. Then the elderly woman asked the Duchess whether it was all that she was ready to tell about herself to those present on the selection. Would she like to add anything else about herself? In response, the girl joyfully said that she had already told everything about herself. She has nothing more to add to this. Then the Empress came closer to both conversations. With a smile on her lips, she noticed that the young Duchess had a very loud and cheerful greeting. This is very unusual for such a girl. Meanwhile, the old Countess continued to get acquainted with the rest of the selection participants. Each of them called her name and informed others about herself. Between the arches of the ceiling of the Imperial Palace, greetings and representations of girls who came from all over the country to participate in the selection sounded for a long time. Well, then the same elderly Countess, who was the main manager of the competition, announced to everyone that they would start the exam. She told everyone to follow her. The girls followed the woman and came to a narrow corridor. Along the corridor, there were a number of doors, behind which were hidden separate rooms for each girl. Beniti carefully examined the place where they were brought. It seemed to her that this place itself makes people be nervous and feel the fear of the grandeur of the imperial family. For a long time, ready to answer any questions posed, the young Duchess gazed intently into the face of an elderly Countess. She was no longer the first time to participate in this difficult exam. The woman asked the girl if she was ready for the exam. After an affirmative answer, she said that it was time to start. It seems that an elderly woman was not so easily an attempt to sit in a chair. She began to slowly sit down, holding her back. At the same time, she grunted a little in pain. And finally, she managed to take her place in the chair. At this time, the Duchess, who decided to conquer the Countess with her ignorant behavior, began to laugh loudly. She wanted to show with all her appearance how funny she was from the suffering of an old woman. The examiner and the examiner were against each other. At the same time, the old woman sat evenly, directly holding her back. On the contrary, she was still a young girl settled down, a half head on an armchair. The Countess noticed how the girl was sitting. She was not too lazy to notice the girl that she had a very wrong posture. And she asked if she could sit evenly. The girl did not think very long on the question posed to her. She replied that her back hurts. With all her appearance, she tried to show how she was painful at that moment. When asked by Countess whether she would call her a man who can make an injection to the girl, she replied that perhaps she was not worth it yet. Countess, satisfied with her response, said that now they will begin the exam. The girl should be careful when answering questions posed, answering clearly and loudly. The girl immediately began to tremble, as if from a chills. She could not be stopped. The Countess could not understand what was happening and therefore asked the girl what happened to her. In response, the girl said that she was asking for forgiveness, but she could not do anything with herself. She has such a habit of shaking her legs when she is a little scared. The Countess angered the girl's answer, and she ordered to stop. An elderly woman was angry. It seemed to her that this young spice allowed herself to mock her. The girl apologized again, continuing to shake, and said that she could not get rid of her habit. An elderly woman stood up with difficulty, leaning on the table set in front of the chair. She decided to stop the trembling of the examined girl. For this, the Countess grabbed the shoulder of the young person with her hand and began to hold her tightly. Grabbing a girl tightly with both hands, she asked her if she needed a soothing injection. For a moment from surprise, the Duchess calmed down and stopped trembling. Seeing a smile in the eyes of an elderly woman, the Duchess thought if she was too far, zealous with her trembling. The Countess announced to the girl that at first they should test her knowledge of history. She asked her if she saw a fountain in front of the palace. The woman turned to the girl with the question that she explained the purpose and reason for the construction of the fountain in the courtyard of the palace. The young Duchess was well known to the name of this fountain. It was called Brave Women. When the Emperor Alendra fought with the dragon, some women came to the battlefield to distribute gunpowder and weapons to soldiers. All these women were turned into ashes. The honor, their act, was named the Imperial Fountain. The girl knew all this, but she could not give such an answer. Therefore, she answered the woman sitting in front of her that it was a large fountain of desires. The Countess asked, surprised by her response, "Why does the girl think so?" Without thinking twice over the answer, the young lady replied that usually people make desires with a fountain. Therefore, this one is a fountain of desire. Then she continued that if he is the largest in the empire, she helps to fulfill the most cherished dreams of people. To say that the woman upset the answer to the girl, that would mean nothing to say. The Countess gloomily looked forward. Then she turned to a girl who was freely feeling on the exam with the question of why wings are depicted on the coat of arms of their empire. The answer to this question was also well known to the girl. When the emperor defeated the dragon on the imperial family, a curse fell, which will disappear only with them. Everyone knew that the damned child gains special forces. However, he subsequently dies because he is not able to curb them. That was the curse of the emperor's family. That is why many heirs died. They died not living until their majority. Only those who did not have much gift survived. But there was still a belief that the emperor will be born, who would defeat the curse. After that, he will be given the opportunity to revive the most abandoned wastelands of the empire. This went on for quite some time. But then at some point the princes stopped dying, and people thought that the dragon curse was gone. This is written in detail in the book The History of the Empire, which is required to read for each nobleman. Each detail of the book was well known to the Duchess. But she answered the posed question incorrectly, saying that the wings do not mean that there is no more dragon. The Duchess calmly listened to the Countess's message that she answered incorrectly. In fact, the wings are a symbol of the dragon curse. An elderly woman advised the girl to reread the History of the Empire, and then she added that the test of her knowledge on history is completed. Then the Countess turned to the girl with a completely unexpected question and asked when she has a birthday. Hearing that she was born on December 12th, she said, "So she was born on the same day as the star." For some reason, the woman's question discouraged the young Duchess. Why would she need to know such details from her life? The Countess continued to ask the most ridiculous questions. She asked the Duchess what she did on her 8th birthday. The girl answered, "But does the Countess herself remember this?" To which she received a rather rude answer that she is not asking questions here at all. The Countess added that the girl knows what will happen if she violates the rules. In response, the girl laughed and said that she would probably be excluded from the selection ceremony. The Countess did not confirm this. She said that the girl would not be excluded. She will be punished with a completely different kind. The Countess moved to the girl as close as possible and whispered menacingly that she could be accused of disrespect for the imperial family. Without stopping, the woman continued that if the prosecution was proved, then part of the lands of the girl's family would be returned to the property of the empire. Beniti said she hears for the first time. She asked a woman this rule has always been, or... Then the girl dared to assume that this rule was invented by the Countess herself. The eyes of the offended Countess blushed from anger raging in her. But still, she restrained herself and only said that in front of the girl, not a single lady behaved so thoughtlessly on the exam. She continued and added that the girl should think very well about her behavior. After all, there is a very big difference between ignorance and negligence. And again, for some reason, there were threats from maids of honor, which surprised the young person. Getting up and starting to walk around the room, the Countess continued to say that if the girl would continue to behave like that, she would be forced to ask the minister to file a lawsuit against her to the imperial family. The Duchess noticed that the woman was very angry. The servants of the Empress are her face. Therefore, an insult to the Countess can be equated with an insult to Her Majesty. Then the girl decided that it was necessary to make her expelled for terrible behavior. She said that it seems that the Countess asked her to tell about her 8th birthday. The girl said that she did not understand what her interlocutor wants to hear from her. She continued to think why the Countess threatens her if she could simply exclude her from the selection of crown princesses. To her question, the Empress's maid of honor replied that not to remember all the details of her childhood is normal. She asked the girl to think about the brightest moments on her birthday. The girl began to carefully consider her answer. She tried to recall what was bright. She even wanted to ignore this question. For some reason, the girl began to seem that this question was not at all accidental, and yet she tried to give an answer to him. Standing by the window and looking at him, the Countess was waiting for an answer. What happened to the girl on her 8th birthday? Looking in the back of an elderly woman, the girl did not find anything better. How to say, did she really think that when she was 8 years old, something had to happen to her? The woman said that she had no idea what the girl was talking about. How can she know what happened to her? Then the girl asked why this question was. Countess's answer killed the Duchess on the spot. It turns out that it was only part of the exam and thus checked her memory. In the main hall of the palace, candles in high chandeliers still continued to burn, but it became noticeably quieter than before the exam. The evening was approaching. At the end of her test, the young Duchess left the corridor with rooms in a large hall. At this time, it was already empty here. The girl was thinking about what had happened on the exam. She noticed that after him, the Countess Alika began to behave strangely. She spoke inconsistently and was constantly mistaken. She was completely incomprehensible to her what could have influenced this cold-blooded woman. Has she really brought her so for her behavior? Already leaving the banquet hall, the girl thought that she would need to find out about this in more detail. The Duchess changed and already, holding the door handle, was about to leave when at the last moment she remembered something. She completely forgot about her maid. To the great surprise of the Duchess, she found her maid quietly snoring on a bench near the imperial palace. The situation seemed very funny to the girl. She quickly jumped to the sleeping maid and woke her with a loud shout. Tired of the long expectation of her mistress, Tasha was glad to hear that all the exams had already ended. Beniti gave her maid with her dresses that impressed everyone and said that it was time for them to go home. When she turned around to call the maid in her eyes, caught that she was very interested in. From afar, the girl saw the familiar red hair of her girlfriend. And while she was talking to someone in the garden, the girls quickly ran so that no one would notice them. The Duchess had to literally pull the surprised maid by the hand. Rosalie wrapped her head in the direction of the noise, but fortunately for both girls, she did not have time to notice anything. Beniti wanted to keep her stay here secretly from her friend and eavesdrop on what she was talking about. While both girls were hiding around the corner of the palace, she, perhaps, her ex-friend came up and looked if there was no one here. She thought she just seemed to her. The Duchess strictly ordered her maid to observe complete silence. She just was taken aback by anger in the eyes of her mistress. The girl began to eavesdrop on what exactly they were talking about in the garden. The interlocutors were 2 young girls. She managed to see one of them. But who was the second? At first, she heard someone said that she did not know that you were interested in plants. Her friend replied that she likes the garden, but she would not master her care. The girl liked the sound of an unfamiliar voice. She really wanted to know who he belongs. But it was necessary to wait and not show the view in order to hear what the girls are talking about. But then a real insight surged into the Duchess. She remembered that she heard this voice well in her previous life. It was the Princess of Selena Reynos. When the girl found out who was another interlocutor, she began to listen to the conversation of the girls even more attentive. Since the princess was exactly the one who saved her from death, she decided to listen to what she was talking about with her friend. After all, it was thanks to her that she returned to the past. Looking at the princess, the Duchess thought that she would definitely believe in her, and that she could fix everything, as the princess asked. She heard her friend ask the princess if she had heard the latest news. Then Rosalie asked if the princess had heard what dress in Miss Beniti was in the selection of Miss. The princess wondered what kind of dress she was in. Her interlocutor replied that the girl had a very defiant outfit today. It seems to her that bad rumors will crawl about her soon. Then she began to describe what the Duchess' dress looked like. There were a lot of diamonds on it. It all just shone with the sunny brilliance and overshadowed the dresses of other girls. The girl said that she did not understand how conscience allowed her to put on this. Therefore, she thinks that the Duchess of Beniti will be discussed. It seems that her friend has not yet become very bad. She added that she knew that Miss Beniti is not at all extravagant. It seems that something just happened to her. At this time, the Duchess triumphed around the corner. It seems that her idea was a success, and her friend surprised the girl even more. As soon as she was able to turn it all out like that, hiding around the corner of the palace, the girl thought that while everything was going according to plan, until she heard the answer from the lips of the princess. The princess asked if the Duchess accidentally bought her dress, impressing everyone in Mariana's boutique. The words of the princesses struck the girl on the spot. She could not understand how the princess guessed her dress. She needed to know this. Her friend said that this dress has a lot of diamonds. In response, the princess asked her whether this dress exists in only one single copy. In response, a friend said she was not sure about it. Then the princess asked if the Duchess's dress, Golden Wave, is called. The Duchess and her faithful maid heard that the dress is really so called. The princess was asked how she found out about it. All the same, continuing to care for her favorite flowers, the princess said that, in fact, when Beniti heard this, she was scared. The princess said that it was in fact that she wanted to buy this dress. Rosalie looked at the princess and could not believe in what she heard. She could not understand how her friend managed to intercept the dress of the princess herself. The princess seemed to be very upset that she could not buy this dress. But neither the Duchess nor her friend, who stood next to the princess, could understand why the princess needed such catchy clothes. In surprise, the girl heard how the princess says that, unfortunately, she could not buy a dress. Her girlfriend with red hair was even more surprised. She asked the princess, "Could that loud dress really like that?" Hearing her words, the princess grinned. She told the girl that she lives in the capital of the fashion country. Then she noticed that it seems that the girl who asked the girl has no taste at all. The dumbfounded girl also heard that she had a dress at all, there are no diamonds. Her surprise, there was no bounds. After these words, the princess put her hand in the pocket of her dress and took out a precious stone from there, which sparkled like a real diamond. She showed him to the girl and said that this stone is called fionite. One little known jeweler under the name Hans developed a cubic stone. This stone looks exactly like a diamond. Struck by her words, Rosalie asked what it means that she looks exactly the same. Is he fake? Sitting around the corner of the palace, the Duchess turned into a heap of ash. The maid was dumbfounded by the words that her lady dressed a dress with fake stones. Then the girls heard the princess's question about why she wanted to buy a dress with false stones. All the same smiling, the princess replied that she was very upset by the questions of a young girl. Is it really so difficult to understand? In order to make a beautiful dress, you need a lot of diamonds. It will then become unbearable, and not a single girl will be able to put him on herself. Meanwhile, commoners also want to dress well. They would also like to wear a dress that looks good and sparkles. But unfortunately, the price is too high. Even tirelessly working for many days and nights, they cannot afford such clothes. But now, thanks to the invention of fionite, everything has become possible. No one else should have problems in choosing beautiful clothes. Now everyone can afford a beautiful and inexpensive dress. After all, fionite is completely inherent in its brilliance to other precious stones. All this was heard by the girls from the story of the princess. Behind the palace corner of the Duchess, the heart began to beat frantically in her chest. So it turns out she put on a dress on which there were no jewelry. It seems that her plan failed. She asked her maid if she had heard anything about this stone. She replied that for the first time she had just heard about something like that. The princess was the younger sister of the crown prince. The Duchess knew that she was a year younger than her. In the whole kingdom, it was known that she loves flowers and different plants very much. She really loved to grow them. But few people know that the real passion of the young princess was dresses. It was to them that she dedicated most of her leisure time. Soon, a nameless designer with excellent skills was supposed to appear in the fashion world. His dresses will be fascinated by everyone. And only during the wedding of the young Duchess should it turn out that this designer was the Princess of Selena. As it turned out later, she will own a huge boutique on the outskirts of the empire. In this boutique, there will never be an end to all famous fashionistas. The princess had a reason to hide her addiction to clothes. This reason was her mother empress. He wanted her daughter to be an ordinary princess. The girl listened to the voices in the garden, afraid to miss something else important, and from the conversation of two interlocutors. Student next to her squat, the maid seemed to want to tell her something. She turned to the mistress, but she only said nothing in response. The young duchess wrapped her to her maid and told her that everything was completely wrong as she might think. She then will try to explain everything to her. The maid really wanted to say that now she understands that her lady came up with. She began to understand why the hostess decided to put on this dress. The princess, meanwhile, said that the tailor managed to sew an unsurpassed outfit. In addition, he was at a very affordable price. Her interlocutor said that it is now clear to her. Then the princess said that Mariana created only one copy of this dress with fionites. She wanted to find a person who is versed in fashion and understanding the value of fionite. The designer was interested in whether people could distinguish a real stone from fake. But everyone refused to buy this dress because they thought it was diamonds. Then the princess exclaimed that people were simply afraid to buy such an expensive dress. They did not even bother to ask about his price. After that, the upset duchess and her joyful maid heard from the princess that only Miss Beniti dared to buy this dress from the designer. The interlocutor asked the princess, why didn't she buy this dress? In response, she said that the designer did not want to sell her. Couturier told the girl that she would give the dress for nothing if she did not find who would buy it from her. The princess added that the dress was bought by a young duchess then. She was dumbfounded by her words. Rosalie was only silent. According to her eyes, the princess realized that the girl also began to understand what exactly she had in mind. The princess uttered the words that completely upset the girl. She said that the duchess was not going to boast of her outfit. She was ahead of the fashion. In the eyes of her ex-friend, there was a disappointment. She mentally said that this should never have happened. The news that she became the innovator of fashion completely upset the young duchess. Her maid, sitting behind the girl, triumphed. After all, it was her lady who wiped her nose to the mistresses of other maids. There were no boundaries of the girl's disappointment. She could not understand how she could come to such conclusions. The tired girl woke up, terribly upset by the events of the previous day. Everything happened completely differently from she planned herself. Thanks to her failed idea, she really received the status of a fashionista. Its popularity increased rapidly. The tireless maid told her that she did not even suspect that her lady thought so deeply when she chose a dress. She did not understand how she could not foresee it right away. Mother told the girl that they had a very smart daughter. She told her that she was very worried about whether she had damaged her daughter her head when she fell from a horse. Then the duchess told her daughter that she had become more insightful. The girl at the same time mixed and upset everything that was happening around her person. After that, people began to look at the duchess in a completely different way. Wherever she appeared, all the eyes were turned first of all to her. At first, she was considered crazy and immature. Now she became very popular among those very people. It even came to the point that she became the heroine of the editorials of the main newspaper of the empire. She was considered almost the main expert in fashion. The girl is completely tired of everything that happened around her recently. It seemed to her that she was missing the previous views of others. Now she was not considered crazy. Everyone has already forgotten about their thoughts when it appeared on the selection. The girl's reputation has only improved, but she felt herself even worse. Even the maid noticed this. Thanks to the young duchess, a cubic conte, which is cheaper than flour, has become very popular. And now all city young ladies began to carry these stones. Together with these stones, the popularity of the duchess itself began to grow even more. The girl all the time thought that she would never have thought of buying this dress if she knew everything in advance, if she knew how it would end. A couple of times during this time, she remembered her visit to the ill-fated boutique. Now she would never go there to buy a dress. She recalled the cunning look of the designer when she had already left her workshop. As it turned out, it was all for a reason. When everything already managed to find out, the girl became clear why Mariana grinned after the exit from her boutique. What a pity that Beniti was unknown in advance. These thoughts again flashed through the duchess in the waiting room before the next exam. Someone shouted from thought. Turning around, the girl saw her friend. She asked if she really chose a dress for herself. Hearing the answer, her friend said that she did not know before, that she was so well versed in fashion. The girl thought that she, too, did not know that her friend was gossiping about her with the princess. A crowd of girls began to move to the place of the next test. On the road, the young duchess did not leave the idea that now she has a very big chance of becoming a potential bride of the crown prince. She decided to resist this by all forces. Today, she will need to fail the exam at all costs. Her task seemed to the girl very difficult, but she had an advantage. She knew what exactly the task is. On the street in the courtyard near the imperial palace, many lonely standing tables and chairs were placed. The subjects began to gather here. Rumming in her head, the girl remembered that today's task would be a definition of a variety of tea. On the exam, the girl should have understood the variety by one smell, tell the beneficial properties and method of growing tea. The girl remembered that in the past it rained in the exam, but she calmly continued to take him, asking her to bring her an umbrella. The Countess Alika, who took the exam, appreciated this act of the girl and noted her as one of the best. But today, the girl had a completely opposite task. She was going to do everything so that her assessment was at the bottom. Cooling near other girls gathered at the ceremony, she began to think so that she had to be undertaken. She thought that, thanks to her memories, she knows that they were waiting ahead, unlike others. So she could help someone with this exam. The Duchess carefully peered into the crowd, looking for someone who could become her candidate to complete the correct tasks in the exam. It was difficult for her to decide who to choose. She remembered that even if there were good points, everyone who is the title below the daughters of the marquises or dukes, they are eliminated from the selection. I needed someone who was able to take her place. The girl drew attention to the Delietta passing by, the daughter of the Marquis Edmund, but she was not familiar with her. Then she turned around and began to look in the crowd of someone else, more suitable. She decided that she would definitely choose this particular girl. The red-haired girl chosen by the Duchess was called Rumina. It seems that it was she who perfectly suited the role of the winner of the exam. She went to the girl, about to talk to her. She was from a very honest family who believes that lies leads only to trouble. The girl thought that she could not be as honest with her chosen applicant, but she was also not going to harm her family. She went to the girl and said that she seemed to know today's task. She thinks that today it will be necessary to guess the variety of tea. The red-haired girl was very surprised that she turned to her. She could not believe that today the task would determine the variety of tea. Meanwhile, the Duchess continued and said that there are only tea tables on the site for conducting the exam. Therefore, it seems to her that questions will be related precisely with tea. Touchingly leaning towards her interlocutor, the girl continued that they have the opportunity to prepare a little better for the exam than others can. The one to which she turned to this proposal was not at all happy with such an opportunity. She asked the girl why she told her this. After all, she thinks that she does not like her at all. Beniti tried to object to her, taking her hand, but she pulled her hand back and moved a little from her. And then she suddenly approached her and said, a dumbfounded girl, that she did not like her at all. Then she added that therefore there would be no useless conversations between them, even if he doesn't dare to approach her with any offers. Leaving, the angry beauty said that she already knows everything about the exam, and the girl had to go to look for someone else who could help with the upcoming test. The Duchess thought that she should find someone else. But what kind of strange manners this girl had. She did not even listen to her to the end. The Duchess again decided to return to her original choice. After the girl listened to what the Duchess immediately told her, she decided that all this sounds rather believable and thanked her for the information. According to the girl, her new chosen one was not so careful. It was necessary to do something about it. She informed the girls surprised that it should rain today. She became aware of this from one wizard while she was traveling to the imperial palace. She added that probably the girl knows that some wizards can predict the weather. She in response raised her head to the sky and said that today is cloudless. Going closer to the girl, the Duchess whispered in her ear that if during the exam she sees a low, flying dragonfly, it will be necessary to ask the examiners to prepare an umbrella for her. She then explained that dragonflies fly low when air humidity increases. After that, the Duchess decided to contact an ex-girlfriend. She called her and said that she had very important and useful information. She decided to tell that it would rain soon. A friend dressed in an elegant dress was worried about his condition. She did not know what to do. Then the girl asked her that she probably did not want to get into the rain. And then she told a surprised friend that it would be even useful to get wet during the exam. She could not understand why it was needed. She herself thought for what she came up with. Probably so that they both be excluded. And herself, flooding with laughter, said that this could not improve their reputation. At this time, she thought that they could still catch a cold. Then they would definitely not receive glasses in the exam. She explained everything to her friend in such a way that if they show resistance in the exam, they deserve the respect of others. A friend immediately agreed with her, thinking that it sounds quite good. She fell into a trap placed. The Duchess was satisfied with how she got out of this situation. Finally, the Countess appeared. She loudly ordered everyone to gather in one place and carefully listened to her. She had already begun to talk about what was supposed to happen today in the exam. However, someone immediately interrupted her. Perplexing, the Countess turned to her, interrupted with the question of what happened to her. The young lady asked her to drink a cup of tea. Since her throat was dry, everyone immediately began to discuss the trick of a young duchess. They could not understand what she would say to. In their eyes, it looked rude. Countess Alika was still about to answer her, cleaning her throat. At the same time, she considered her answer. To the surprise of all those present, the girl did not wait for the answer to the elderly woman. She grabbed a teapot with tea and began to pour it into a cup. Then, in the eyes of an angry woman, the Duchess grabbed a cup and drank all its contents in one gulp. It all happened so quickly that no one had time to come to his senses. And the prankster began to sob loudly, saying that the tea was too hot. Ignoring the girl's loud screams, the Countess said that now she would explain what will happen next to the exam. It seems that no one paid attention to the words of a strict examiner. She herself was surprised at the sound that she had just heard. All girls with a condemning look looked towards the Duchess. It was not clear to them how she could behave so obscene. The whole thing was that the girl, having drunk a full cup of tea, buried very loudly. She needed to do something. And now, with a joyful look, she asked for forgiveness for her so unseemly act. If her mother had seen and heard her at that moment, then she would probably have failed underground. How much time she spent on teaching her daughter to good manners. The old Countess seemed greener with anger. With reproach and hatred in her eyes, she looked directly at the guilty girl. Beniti, on the other hand, did not find anything better than to apologize again with a smile on lovely lips. Looking into the face of the indignant Countess, the girl thought that now her reputation would definitely decrease. It was very important for her. She thought that after the exam, everyone would make fun of the Duchess for this belch. After all, decent girls do not do that. The girl also thought not alcohol or consumes the Countess. She emptied her cup and called the girl to her. When she came up, she turned to her with the question that, it seems, the girl had not yet completely mastered the etiquette of tea drinking. Did it? Beniti laughed loudly and said that she just wanted to drink very much, and she could not stop. Wiping a drop of sweat on her face, an elderly woman asked the Duchess if she knew the name of the tea she had just drunk. The girl could answer her without thought. Of course, she knew what a variety of tea, and absolutely everything about him was known to her. It was tea from artichoke. It has no aroma and has a mild taste. It belongs to very expensive teas, so commoners cannot buy it. But he is familiar to each nobleman. Despite the fact that she recognized the variety of tea, the girl had to answer completely incorrectly. She loudly stated that it was tea with bergamot. The Countess did not bother to tell her anything in response. And then after thinking a little, she asked why she thinks so. The Duchess continued her game. She replied that she felt the taste of bergamot when she drank tea. It seems that her answer did not like the strict examiner at all. The Countess came closer to the girl and leaned to say something in her ear. In a strict voice, she told the Duchess that the last time she seemed to her that the girl was not determined to take exams. The young Duchess carefully listened to the woman. She already said with a threat in her voice that this time she went too far. Then she said that the nobles drink tea more often than water. Was the girl to think that the woman would believe her? Looking intently in the face and eyes of the Duchess, the Countess asked not to get her into her affairs. She also advised me to be careful in her actions. She stated that she did not want to participate in this. The girl treated the words of the Countess with caution. She realized that she was very angry with this woman. It seems that now she will be worse. She thought that she could only get wet in the rain. After that, she certainly should not have been left here. But the girl warned by her will definitely become a favorite selection. Dedicated to the secret of the approach of the rain, carefully watched the sky. She noticed dragonflies that flew very low above the ground. When she noticed them, she decided to approach the Countess conducting them. She was surprised by the appeal to her from the young person. The girl decided to tell the Countess that, judging by the low, flying dragonflies, it would rain soon and asked her to be given an umbrella. It seems that the woman was very surprised by this request. But then she also looked around to notice the low, flying dragonflies near the tables. The words of the girl were confirmed. After thinking a little, the Countess raised her head to the sky and began to examine the cloud approaching from the west. Then the woman always took a sheet of paper that was present with her and began to record something on it. Most likely, these were additional points to the girl for the observed observation. Behind all this, which is happening near her, the young Duchess watched vigilantly. She heard the Countess told the girl warned by her that she would ask for her to be prepared for her umbrella. Beniti was very pleased with herself. She perfectly coped with the task and perhaps will soon be able to free herself from. The Duchess mentally wished the girl to continue to earn their precious points. And at this time, it began to rain. With the beginning of the rain, an unimaginable bustle began around. Everyone ran, trying to hide somewhere from him. Although the maids have already begun to take out umbrellas, it seems that it was already a little late. The young Duchess stood in the rain with an empty teacup in her hand. No one suggested bringing her an umbrella. Perhaps it was because of the exam. The girl thought that everything was going as she needed. Everything developed according to her plan. And the only one that could prevent its implementation was the Countess, who quickly approached her in the rain. An elderly woman went up to her and began to watch her face intently. Perhaps the fate of the girl could decide now. They could have expelled her, but things were completely different. The Countess asked the girl permission to see her and then touched her warm hand with her warm hand. Having strictly glancing at the young person, the woman said that it seems that the exam was finished for the girl. Today, she will no longer take anything. The girl was even glad of such an opportunity. It was exactly what she dreamed about so long. She was happy that she would not have to attend the selection of crown princesses anymore. But unfortunately, the following words of Countess upset the young Duchess. She told her that she had a strong body temperature. This can affect the health of a young girl. Therefore, there can be no question of any exam. It seemed that nothing could have disappointed the Duchess even stronger than these words of Countess. In the meantime, she turned towards the girls who were covered with umbrellas. The exam continued for them. At the same time, another of the girls continued to get wet in the pouring rain. Followed by the advice of her girlfriend Rosalie, was not going to hide from him. And then there was one exactly the same. It is not known why Rumina also decided to follow the example of two girls. And now, even a cup of tea in her hands could not stop the girl from trembling from the cold. Countess Alika turned to all three girls who got wet during the rain. She asked to approach her and then go to the hospital ward with her. In the infirmary, unusually incessant sneezing were heard. A red-haired girl with a white bandage on her head asked the Duchess not to sneeze so loudly. She did not slow down with her answer. The girl told her friend in misfortune that she sneezed even more. And then she wondered what she did in the rain without an umbrella. Without thinking twice, Rumina said, "I'm a fool. They thought I did not know that you wanted to get wet specially." The third of the affected girls asked the other two to shut up. Her head was terribly ill. Lying on a hospital bed and with difficulty breathing his nose, the young Duchess thought that Rumina had gone crazy. This girl belonged to the Viscount Askandar family, which had a small estate in rural areas. At first, it brought quite little income to its owners, but then, to their happiness, they found coal deposits nearby. Thanks to this mineral, Viscount gradually expanded his business and put together a great fortune. The result of this was the receipt of the title of the Duke. Because of this, the other nobles were unhappy with the Rumina family, because initially they had a low title. They simply began to avoid everywhere. None of the nobles was going to communicate with them. Their daughter had an inferiority complex, and as a result, Rumina hated all the nobles. Most of all, this girl began to hate the Duchess and her friend. And now she was with them in the same hospital ward. Lying in bed, the young Duchess thought that it was a little uncomfortable to be with people who hate you. But she was ready to tolerate it in order to achieve her goal. Already falling asleep, the girl thought that thanks to this, she would miss the remaining part of the exam. But as it turned out, she began to rejoice early. Further events in the Empire again upset the young ducal. She could not understand why this was all repeated again. How did people again manage to overwhelm her actions? The maid who came running to the Duchess brought the newspaper and began to read her editorial. She asked the mistress to listen to how the suggestible sounded there about her. A huge article was dedicated to 3 girls who ended up in the hospital ward. They said about them that the girls did not refuse the exam even under the heavy rain. The maid was happy that she had such a zealous lady. How cool it is. Then the maid proudly continued to read that all other candidates scolded all for an inhuman act. Having turned the newspaper read into a bundle, the maid loudly declared how the rest of the selection participants could ignore her mistress and not help her. Such heartlessness on their part. The tireless maid continued her story. She heard that people now say that they could rely on a princess who is not afraid to get wet. The young Duchess could not restrain laughter when her maid was performed. She even asked her if she would like to change their service in their house to work in the theater, and that was uncontrollably proudly for his young mistress. She was not so happy. As a result, the Duchess's dreams were not destined to come true again. Everything again turned upside down. As before, she had to take part in the selection of a hereditary princess. Again, this hated hall. After some time, all the girls were again gathered in the great hall of the imperial palace. The selection of the bride of the crown prince began to approach his completion. Her red-haired acquaintance approached the young duchess and said that she already knew everything. Then she added that she knew that two girls were specially going to get into the reign. That was their insidious plan. The duchess replied that she was not going to do this. Her plans were not at all to become the favorite of the competition. In fact, she did not want to become the bride of the hated Prince Karzan at all. She could not understand why everything was going awry. In front of the assembled girls came out an elderly countess. She announced that now she would announce 3 applicants for the princess. The red-haired beauty Rumina was the first to be named. It seems that the girl was very delighted with this choice of strict judges. Then it came to rejoice in a girl with red hair named Rosalie. And the third, of course, was named one who was not at all happy with this choice of judges. This all only upset her. Although the girl suggested such a development of events, but still deep down, she hoped that they would be excluded. After announcing the results of the exams, the girls could return home for a short time. The young duchess immediately hastened to take this opportunity. A very warm welcome was waiting for the girl at home. Her joyful mother immediately stated that she was sure that her daughter would surely deal with everything. In response to the wife's demand to confirm her words, the girl's father immediately agreed with her, and with what pride her maid spoke with her. She said that a lot about her mistress. Everyone considers her a real hereditary princess who will serve his people well. The young duchess was looking for the words that she could answer all her welcome. Finding no words, she decided to think carefully. Then the girl asked her mother and leave her alone with her maid. Those are reluctant, but still agreed with the request of the girl. When the girl and mother of the girl left the room, the duchess noticed her wife that it seemed that her daughter had not yet passed the cold. Before leaving, parents asked a young person to rest well. And now she was sitting lonely in her room. The duchess thought that she now definitely needed to draw up a new plan. She did not want to become the bride of the crown prince. She remembered that candidates should soon take part in the competition, after which they will choose a hereditary princess. She also remembered that before that, the girls would meet with the empress at the ceremony, where they will be awarded the pendants of candidates for the princess. The girl remembered that if someone does not take part in this ceremony, he will be automatically excluded. The young one especially thought that I would like to refuse to participate. But remembering the joyful face of her mother when she found out about her victory, the girl realized that she could not refuse. She could not explain everything to her mother. There was no good reason for this. For a young girl from a noble family, it would be to be most ridiculous to abandon the title of crown princess. Therefore, the girl decided to look for an alternative to this decision. And it seems to her that she found her. The first step was to pack their things in a road bag. Having resolutely gathering all her will into a fist, the young duchess decided to escape from home. It seemed to her the best decision in the circumstances. In her bag, she put only the most necessary things. Among them, there was also an oil lamp, a food of long-term storage. Another girl decided to rent a carriage. In a deep evening, when the whole movement in the house was calmed down, the girl for the last time checked the contents of the bag. She made sure that everything was ready to escape. When Beniti had already taken a road bag, she decided that she would return only when she would be sure that she was excluded from the selection of a hereditary princess. Leaving the walls of the ducal house, she thought that this should take a week or so. She did not see any way out how to run away from home. She just needed to hold out a little. The duchess with quick steps was removed from the house. She hoped that she would succeed because she knew a lot of things that she did not know before. On the street, the girl continued to think about the same. If she can use her knowledge, then the future will change. When the father's house was already behind, the girl decided to look into the cart again and check everything. Her path ran to the north, to Kubaran, where she was heading for 4 days of the journey. The duchess thought that her father would never have believed that she could someday get there herself. Holding a map in her hands, she was sure that no one in the family would look for it there. Kubaran was chosen by her precisely because there was a mentor of her father, the Duke of Kubaran. To get there, the girl had to be ready for any unforeseen circumstances. The young duchess tried to move as quickly as possible, but unusual for long walking is quite quickly tired. She understood that the road would be difficult. In addition, she was burdened by a road bag with things. The girl decided to check her plan again. You need to take the carriage to Vanessa, spend the night there, then take another and go to Rissos. You could choose a short way there, but then she would have to spend the night in the open air, and then again spend the whole day on the road without stops to get to the final place. The young duchess remembered how she got a book that helps her travel now. She was helped by a servant who works in the stable of her father. She asked to find the book she needed, and he gladly agreed to help her. She was very grateful to the boy for this. In this book, there was information that would help a young traveler on the road a lot. It was a guide for novice travelers. When the young man gave her a book, he dared to get a curling, for which she needed the Duchess. She asked him to talk quietly. She did not want someone to hear their conversation. She asked the young servant not to tell anyone about it. In no case should her parents be recognized, as well as her talkative maid. The Duchess gazed stare at the young man in the eye and said that she did not happen to her. No one should know about it. The words of the young lady scared the young man. He asked her, "What does the phrase, 'so that it doesn't happen' means?" The Duchess did not go into details and finally took the promise from the young man that he would keep everything a secret. After a conversation with the young Duchess in the eyes of the servant, bewilderment was read. He would really like to understand what was happening, but having not received any explanation, he agreed. He hoped that everything would be in order with her, and her father did not have to worry about this. The girl was very pleased with herself and began to prepare for preparations at the rest of her plan. The girl thought that thanks to this book that the servant gave, she was able to find out where you can rent a carriage and spend the night. The Duchess continued her path with a dark, lit by a full moon with a forest. Before the parking lot with the carriages, she had 2 more hours left. The young lady was a little cut off. She thought if she was hurrying to the trip, it seemed that her disease had not yet retreated. She began to tremble in chills. The girl was cut to the very bone. She would like to warm up at least a little, but she was forced to continue her path. After all, if she hesitates, it can be left without a carriage. Beniti gazed at the moon intently to find out by her position more precisely, which is now an hour. The girl mentally ordered herself to move forward faster and still added a step. When the Duchess came into place, she was very out of breath. Satisfied with herself, she crouched to rest a little. She was greeted by the station warden and asked what kind of carriage she would like to choose for herself. The young Duchess began to inspect the carriages placed in a row, from which one had to choose one. The girl decided that she would have to choose a carriage with curtains, for which no one can then see her in the light of day. Tying after him her heavy road bag and struggling to stand on the step of the carriage, the girl was satisfied that she would finally hit the road. She looked even more self-propelled after it was conveniently settled in the soft seat of the carriage. She considered herself a beauty. A string of carriages drawn by beautiful horses and carts slowly moved by the imperial tract. Great bay trots were also harnessed to the carriage of the young Duchess. In one of these carriages, a young Duchess sat, who began to notice that for some reason they were moving slowly. Suddenly, the girl heard some noise at the door of her carriage, and then also suddenly, this door opened. Someone who jumped up in her carriage scared the young person. It was difficult to discern him because he was dressed in a black cloak with a large hood. A cold horror froze on the girl's face when she saw the face of the one who jumped up her carriage. She even wanted to scream from the suffered fear, but the uninvited guest was more agile. He quickly and deftly closed the girl's mouth with his palm. Then, continuing to keep her head, he asked her for silence. He later promised her that he would let her go if she did not scream. After the pain and resentment suffered, fear gradually began to leave the young Duchess. A tear flowed down her cheek. The girl promised the young man to remain silent with a nod of her head. In response, he freed her from his capture. Now that the fear has passed, the girl decided to consider her uninvited guest well. It turned out that he was well acquainted with her. Before the girl was the one from whom she was now trying to run away. It was Karzan Crown Prince. When the young Duchess calmed down a little, she noticed a prince's road bag on the floor of carriages. She peered intently into the face of a young man who was sitting back. The girl remembered that he usually has black hair and red eyes, but looking at the young man, she realized that he was masked under the blonde when he wants to hide his personality from others. Probably now the moment has come when the prince had to hide, and for this he was forced to change his appearance. The Duchess thought about why he needed it. After all, he was the son of the most influential person in the state. She remembered that the last time, the day before the announcement of the Crown Princess Karzan, also wanted to escape, but he was caught. The girl thought that it seems that this time he decided to do the same. Beniti remembered its previous relationship with the prince. This was the same person who treated her coldly. This was the same person whom she saw dead on the first night after her wedding with him. She no longer wanted to see him, and that is why she escaped. And now, sitting opposite him and looking into his face, the Duchess thought about why they met again. The young man turned to the Duchess with a request. He asked her to take him to Vanessa. She was surprised by the request of the press. She remembered that it was in this place that he was caught by the palace guards last time. She thought that this time the palace guard would pursue them again. Therefore, she said that she could not take him. Hearing her negative answer, the young man again turned to her for help. Having gritted a nasal face on her face, the girl told him how to ask for help with such a terrible mug. Then the Duchess told the young man, who was taken aback by her words, that he wants help after he plucked her mouth and dared to threaten her. The young man could not understand what he was talking about. The stranger. But reflecting, he agreed that he was a little rude with her. All this enraged the Duchess very much. She was not going to listen to his apology, but demanded that he immediately leave her carriage. The Crown Prince put his hand in his pocket, extended a whole handful of gold coins from there, and offered them to the girl for the opportunity to stay in the carriage. At first, she was ready to agree with this. The girl decided that with these coins, she could live comfortably away from home. But then, having come to her senses, the girl still decided not to be a fool. She doesn't need his money. The surprise prince heard another negative answer from her. He did not manage to agree with the stubborn fellow traveler. The girl already wanted to sleep. Therefore, she closed her eyes in an attempt to nap a little. The young man, who had begun her before conversations, now just stared at the girl's face. The young lady opened her eyes and began to order a fellow traveler to leave her carriage. She stated that she did not want to be next to him, but the prince was not so simple. He said that he agreed, but asked if he could tell everything about when he leaves the carriage. Surprised by his words, the girl asked what else he was going to talk about. The prince began to answer. He said that her clothes look ordinary, but it is clear that this tissue of high quality, which no commoner could afford. He began to bend the fingers of his hand. And he continued that she was going in a rented carriage without an escort and a family coat of arms. Then the young man summed up that his fellow traveler was definitely hiding something. Or maybe she is hiding from someone. How the young Duchess wanted at that moment to scream the prince in the face, that it was precisely because of him that she was forced to be here. The girl told the young man that he could take another carriage. I wonder why he needed this one. Throwing one of his leg on the other, the prince answered her that, alas, there was no more free carriage. He had to be content with this. The Duchess frowned in her corner of the carriage and began to reflect. She did not want someone to know about her at all. She thought about whether the prince could fulfill his promise and tell others about her. During his acquaintance with him, she was convinced that he belongs to those people who do not choose methods at all. The girl was tormented by doubts. She was embarrassed by the fact that she and the prince were heading to the same place. But at the same time, it was pleased that they had different destinations. Thinking well, the girl agreed and allowed the prince to stay in her carriage. Then she added that as soon as they arrived, they would have to immediately disperse. The young man did not answer her, continuing to look out the window. Not hearing an answer from him, the girl decided that he simply decided to mock her. Then the Duchess decided to look out the window too to see where they are now. According to her calculations, there were another quarter day of the journey. The girl began to think about how difficult it would be for her to spend for a long time with a person so hated by her. The prince sat silently, crossing his hands on his chest. It seems that he was not a little disturbing the presence of another person here. The girl looked at the prince again and thought that they would have to spend quite a lot of time together. They were destined to communicate for the first time outside of any statuses. She thought that one question could afford if the prince is now no one for her. She turned to him with the question of what caused his flight. In response, he told the girl why he should be frank with her. Such a rude answer. A little offended the young Duchess. This was not what she expected from him. The girl thought that even now the prince shows her bad character. The prince gloomily continued to look out the window. And his fellow traveler thought, why is he looking there all the time? She turned to him again and said that she just wanted to listen to his story. He said nothing. As before, he struck her with a rude answer and said, do he need to satisfy her curiosity? The girl thought and said that it would be so. She understood everything and would not ask him anything else. She forgot that now they were on equal terms, so according to the old habit, she apologized to him. Their carriage continued its leisurely path. Inside her, the girl thought that she should no longer have any experiences about the prince. When they arrived, the girl paid off the coachman, paying him for the road and giving money to live in a hotel. When she finished her communication with the person who brought her, she turned into the hope of seeing the prince again. But it seems that the trace has already caught a cold. As far as there was enough vision of the girl of the square and the streets around were empty, she decided that he had already left. The girl began to rejoice that finally could relax. Looking around, the young Duchess decided that she urgently needed to find a place for an overnight stay. She thought that her escape was impeccably successful, but she was mistaken. The girl noticed that her things were stolen while she slept. She tried to ask the owner of the hotel, but in response, he said that it was not worth saying such nonsense. He would never have done anything like a completely stranger. The young Duchess, ready to burst into tears, already burst into tears that this is not her fault, that things were stolen. In response, the owner of the hotel calmly advised the Duchess to complain to the city administration if she was unhappy with something. During her conversation with the owner of the hotel, someone was distracted from him from behind her. He was a local merchant who offered the girl his help. He said that through him, she could sell her clothes and get a lot of money for her. The Duchess did not have any other exit on how to agree to the help of this traders. Therefore, she gave him her pajamas. But to her great regret, the merchant never returned. In the sky above the city, rain clouds began to gather. The young Duchess, in some kind of cast-ups that the merchant offered to her for the exchange, stood at the hotel door, peering into the unknown. Behind her, the owner of the hotel was sitting behind his persistent and chuckled quietly into his beard. Then he got up, went out because of his rack, and told the girl that she should leave his hotel. Frightened and offended by all what happened to her, the girl silently looked back in response. She could not even imagine where she should go now. There was no young Duchess where to go in an unfamiliar city for her. It continued to fall on the street, still on the street. She should not even count on the sympathy of the hotel owner. The girl stood in the doorway of the hotel, not daring to step under the pouring rain, and began to think what to do now. One of the options for solving her problem was an appeal to the city administration. So the owner of the hotel advised her. But then the girl's family will know about this. In the district, the news will quickly fly around that the girl escaped from the house on the day of the announcement of candidates for the princess. Since this option did not fit, it was necessary to come up with something else. And now the girl puzzled her head over the solution of this problem. Meanwhile, the sky above her head was noticeably enlightened. Clouds began to leave and dissipate. In front of the hotel, the girls opened the streets on which people began to walk. As soon as the rain stopped, they were becoming more and more. The young Duchess carefully looked down at her clothes. The merchant gave her real cast-ups. The girl's dress was glossy with a long wearing. In some places, it was very worn. In doing, the girl thought that as soon as she changed into this clothes, her image of the noble miss immediately disappeared. She continued to think, and then a sudden thought occurred to her. She thought about a man who could help her. It was the one with whom she came to this city. The Duchess decided that she should definitely not stay on the street. To do this, she needed to find a prince. In order to navigate in an unfamiliar city, she was forced to seek advice to a passing woman. From the news that she heard in her previous life, she knew where the search group exactly caught the prince. At that moment, he dined in the most famous establishment of this town. Therefore, the girl needed to find where it is. She thanked the woman who indicated her path and urgently went there. The Duchess rushed with all her legs to overtake the prince of the first. It was just vital for her. Soon, she was near the tavern. Looking out the window, she noticed a dining married couple. With what pleasure her lunch absorbed, a young woman sitting at the table. How would the Duchess would be in the place of this woman now? The girl carefully peered out the window, looking for her eyes inside the prince. Due to the woman tasting near the window, she had a drooling woman. As it seemed to her, the prince has not yet appeared here. The girl was attracted by a fragrant smell coming from the institution, but she was forced to leave because she scared people sitting near the window. The young Duchess stepped a little away from the tavern and began to peer into the crowd, looking for the prince. She finally noticed him. He walked slowly, not paying attention to passers-by and what happened around him. When he came even closer, the girl noticed that he hummed some unpretentious motive. As soon as the prince was in front of her, the young Duchess rushed to his transit, blocking the road. The young man was surprised by the sudden appearance of some kind of beggar. He thought that he almost applied magic to protect. The prince tried to get around this girl, but she did not retreat from her. It seems that she had very serious intentions. Having placed her hands to the sides, this beggar turned to him with a prayer for help. The young man could not understand what she wanted from him. He asked a beggar what she would need to help her. In response, she turned to the prince with the question if he would recognize her. After all, she saved him last night. The young man heard from a poorly dressed beggar that it was thanks to her that he was able to get here safely. The Duchess joyfully began to notice that he finally recognized her. Despite her clothes, the girl's voice and appearance were familiar to the prince. The young man smiled and noted what an interesting sight he is now watching. This is not to say that he was not surprised by the appearance of the former fellow traveler. Then the curious prince asked the girl what could have happened to her. Without thinking for a minute, she replied that they stole money from her and then also took her clothes with tricks. The girl said that even her cat seemed smarter than the hostess. She would not have done so much nonsense. The prince said that the cats in his house are definitely smarter than the girl. At least they are more quick-witted. The Duchess remembered the cat's cat. It was a thick, spoiled animal that could not do anything on its own. The girl thought about her and wanted to ask the prince already. Did he really think that she was useless to the cat's cat? But I stopped in time. The prince was curious what happened to his fellow traveler. Therefore, he asked her to tell about everything. She replied that everything was fine before the moment she fell asleep. When she woke up, her things disappeared without a trace. It seems that the prince laughed her words. He was perplexed that she remained in the hotel herself. Then he said that it would be strange if nothing had happened to the noble woman and without servants. The affected Duchess heard from the young man that probably the robbers from the very beginning planned everything. That is why the idiotic owner of the hotel drove her. The girl again turned to her interlocutor for help. He did not fail to notice how she looked sorry for at that moment. The whistling prince told the girl that he was not going to help her. He has enough of his affairs. The Duchess' refusal the young man to help her struck her in the very heart. She had no one else to hope. The prince continued and said that he had repaid her for yesterday. He does not feel any duty to her. Feelings of hatred and hopelessness burst out a poor girl. She did not even have the strength to answer the young man. Meanwhile, he said that he had already done everything he could do for her. His conscience will be completely pure. But the Duchess, dressed in a beggarly outfit, was not going to give up just like that. She decided to resort to the last opportunity. The girl said in the face of a thoughtful prince that if he did not help her, she will tell everyone that he made his way to her carriage. Then the Duchess continued to blackmail him and said that it seems that she was not the only noblewoman who escaped from the house. Sticking in the face of the Duchess, the young man thought about what he should do. Finally, it seems that he decided something. He did not say a word. He began to move, bypassing the Duchess. From this action, the girl, of course, immediately was taken aback. She could not believe that he could do so with her. The young Duchess was supposed to do at least something. She shouted into the prince in the back of the prince that she would tell everyone how he got into her carriage at night and that he escaped from the house. But the young man, it seems, did not scare her words with in any way. He replied that hardly anyone could believe the girl in this form. When he was ready, he was to hide from her appearance. The Duchess shouted to him that she knew that they were looking here. The prince stopped, wrapped his head, and looked intently at the girl. He was interested in her last phrase. Beniti triumphed about what happened. Finally, she came across her. The girl told the prince that she saw people in the form with the imperial coat of arms. They said they were looking for a blue-eyed blonde. The prince stopped and listened carefully to his interlocutor. He tried to understand what she was talking about. They stood opposite each other on the bridge street of the town. The Duchess decided to ask the young man to say about him whether these people talked about him. Then she continued and said that the people who were looking for a blonde said that they would come here then. That is why she decided to come here and warn him. It seems that the girl was convincing in her words. It seems that the prince believed her because he asked where she needed. The Duchess replied that she was going to Kubaran and she only needed money for renting carriages. It seems that her words were a little surprised by the young man. He said that he could not believe it. But the girl insisted on her own and repeated that she only needed money on the carriage. The prince said in response that he did not mean this. He spoke completely different. Then he said what the girl was least expected to hear from him. The young man said that he was also heading to Kubaran. Now the turn has come to be surprised at the young person. The Duchess could not believe her ears. One thought about why Karzan was going to Kubaran, what he could forget there. Thinking a little, the young man agreed with her and promised the girl to take her. He said that in this way he was going to pay her for everything. He added that he does not like debts, so he will never fit into them. Now the time has come to be indignant at the young Duchess. She asked the prince to wait, saying that she needed to think a little. She did not want to go with him at all. But it seems that there was no other way out because he said that he did not have much money left, because he gave it to some. The prince approached the still-thinking Duchess and said that they just needed to go to Kubaran together. Thus, the young Duchess found herself in a luxurious carriage in an old beggarly dress. Strange thoughts were dug by the girl. She still could not understand why she was so unlucky. The prince who entered the carriage informed her that today they would be forced to spend the night on the street. He told the girl, surprised by his words, that they needed to walk a little through the forest to the hollow. There they will find the camp area where they can spend this night. The prince continued and said that the place there is quite safe. He explained to the girl that she had absolutely nothing to worry about. It is impossible not to say that the girl was not struck by the words of the prince. She was very surprised that he had just tried to reassure her. While the prince continued to talk on the street with the coachman, she thought that usually the young man had never done so. When all the preparations were completed, travelers took their places in a comfortable carriage. The young duchess could not calm down and asked the prince why he was heading for Kubaran. Karzan was in no hurry to answer, and in response asked her why she escaped from home. Beniti replied that she plans to return in a couple of days. At this time, she thought that she did not want her wedding with a young man sitting next to her. She did not answer his question, noticing that her question was the first to sound. The young man thought for a long time. The duchess seemed that he was not going to answer her question. But then, to her amazement, he replied that he wants to avoid engagement. These were words that struck the young duchess on the spot. The answer of the young man contradicted everything that she knew about him before. The duchess gazed intently in the face of the prince. It turned out that she did not know this person at all. The girl looked at the prince, holding the open book in her hand, and asked why he did not want to engage. Without thinking twice, the prince replied that he did not know his chosen one at all. The girl sitting nearby thought she was nearby, and he managed to meet her. She also thought that he was a crown prince, and for him it was inevitable. But as follows from the words of the young man, that was not all. The duchess asked what he could tell. Continuing to read his book, the prince asked her why he should tell her every detail. This question seemed strange to the duchess. She did not tell the young man that he himself began this conversation. The young man wondered if he should tell him everything to his interlocutor. After all, yesterday he was not familiar with her. The young man continued to be silent. At the same time, his neighbor in the carriage carefully watched him. The duchess began to recall everything that she had known to her before her fellow traveler. She began to consider the book that the young man held in her hand. It seemed to her that it could be a textbook on magic. If she was not mistaken, it was he. All citizens of the empire knew that all members of the imperial family were able to use magic. This was what was transmitted from them from generation to generation. The prince sitting next to her also did not differ from them. He even achieved such successes that he began to stand out. The girl remembered that the real passion of the prince has always been study. All the time he was absorbed in it. It seemed that he never released books from his hands. The girl thought that she would be interested to know why someone needed to kill the crown prince. It is hardly only to get rid of her family. Or perhaps the prince was the goal from the very beginning. When they came to the place of the night halt and left the carriage, the girl was dumbfounded from the beauty that had presented before her. She was clearly not ready for this. The evening has already arrived and dully burned with light candles and lanterns hung everywhere. This only gave the piquancy to this strange place. She saw the wanderers who scattered on the grass and began their evening meal. A little further, a couple of people slept in a tent. It seems that every traveler could find here the opportunity to relax after a long journey. The young duchess used to hear about this place several times, but has never been here. She looked around everything around and thought it was like a summer camp. The contemplation of the environment and the thoughts of the young person was interrupted by someone who brought sandwich to her ear. Her young fellow traveler approached her and invited her to have dinner, holding out the same sandwich in her hand. An unimaginable aroma came from him. They're tired of the long road. Kucher was also going to rest. The man began to prepare for bed. While the young lady enjoyed her food, the prince told her that there are many people here, and therefore the animals would not approach them. The young man also held a sandwich in his hand, but so far he did not begin to eat him. He told the girl that she might not be afraid to sleep. The groom, who prepared young people with the place where they had to sleep, said that, perhaps, should go to the horses. Hearing his words, the interlocutors wrapped their heads in his direction. The young man said that the servant could go. When it was finished with the delicious dinner, the girl asked her fellow traveler, where did she go to bed? Where is her sleeping bag? The young man replied that she was unlikely to be given such an opportunity. They had no sleeping bags, but there were only blankets. It seems that his answer was a little annoyed by the young companion. A fire of anger flared up inside the girl. She told the prince that he told her that he had everything necessary for travel. The answer of the young man did not surprise the girl. He repeated again that some had taken all the money from him, and therefore he could not buy all things. The duchess was horrified by what she heard. She did not understand how to sleep in such weather then. But then the girl realized that no one would perform her whims. She calmed down, deciding that he could somehow spend the night of this night. But already lying next to the prince in a carriage, the girl still could not calm down. She could not fall asleep in any way. The Duchess felt cold. Not accustomed to such conditions, she began to tremble. Trembling with his whole body, she looked at the prince who had fallen next to her and thought that in theory they were strangers. But she remembered that she had married him. She would never have thought that she would have to sleep with someone with whom she had not even able to sleep on a wedding night. The thoughts of the Duchess were interrupted. An angry prince suddenly broke on his feet. He said that she was preventing him from sleeping. "Stop turning already." Then the young man noticed how much his fellow traveler was trembling. The surprised Duchess looked at the prince that was torn to her feet, quickly running away from the carriage in which they had to sleep. After some time, he went back, entered the carriage, and gave the girl something wrapped in fabric. Holding a bundle in her hand, the Duchess asked the young man what he brought. The river looked rather unusual. In response, the young man said that this was a warm stone. He asked the girl to go to bed and fall asleep. The Duchess thanked the prince, still continuing to keep the stone on her knees. And the young man at this time, as if nothing had happened again, and fell asleep peacefully. It seemed that nothing could break his dream. The young Duchess lay down, laid a warm stone on her chest, and tried to fall asleep. But, as luck would have it, the eyes all did not want to close. And while a highly rising full moon covered the forest located under her, the girl continued to think about why the prince became so kind. The coachman who approached the carriage with travelers said that he was sleeping very well thanks to the warm stone that the young master gave him. Near him stood a prince who asked the coachman to bring water for breakfast because he wants soup with pancakes. A grateful servant promised to cook everything right there for breakfast. He said that he would immediately start cooking. To his words, the young master replied that he only needs water, and he was going to cook himself. The words of the prince seemed to be very surprised by the coachman. With all his appearance, he showed this particular. Then another surprised head wrapped in a warm blanket leaned out of the carriage. The Duchess asked the prince whether he really knows how to cook. The young man replied that she had absolutely nothing to worry about because he was not going to poison her. He asked her to wait a bit. In response, the girl, twisting, made his face and said how scared she was to hear it. While breakfast was being prepared, the girl was thinking about what was happening with her familiar person. Why didn't she know about it before? Kucher and the young Duchess with pleasure ate the prince's hands with the hands of the prince. He was a success to him. It was delicious. During breakfast, the girl did not leave the thought that Karzan knows how to cook. And besides, as it turned out, very tasty. She could not believe how the prince learned this. During breakfast, the girl and coachman praised breakfast all the time. They would definitely ask for supplements if a little more was prepared. The young man also watched them with obvious pleasure. It looks like he liked the cooking process. Then the young man gained water and offered it to both treated. It seemed as if he had read their thoughts. When the prince gave the girl water, he told her to be in no hurry because the water is hot. Surprised by his words, the young Duchess carefully looked into the face of a young man. She looked closely at him and tried to understand whether it was the person she knew. The girl thanked and began to think about what was in a past life. She specifically wanted the prince to pay attention to her. When she fell, she hoped that he would at least give her a hand. But to the deep chagrin of the girl, nothing happened in response. Nothing could make a prince. As soon as he saw that the girl fell and was not going to get up, he immediately left. The same thing happened when the Duchess cut on the spikes of roses that he left. After the girl fell a fountain, he did not think to help her in something. He always threw her. Even at any official events, the young man also tried not to touch the girl. Once she wrote him a letter in which she suggested visiting a young man. But then, when she came to the door of his room, in front of the door, the girl was waiting for the frightening size of the snake. Looking at how the young man offers his coachman water, the Duchess understood that he was different both externally and the character from the one she knew in a past life. Then she did not understand why he was so cruel with her. By the evening of the next day, they finally arrived in the city, where they were supposed to be at night again. In the fall in this area, there have always been a lot of tourists. The hostess of the hotel, where they were going to stop at night, said that she had no rooms at such a late hour. One advised them to look for another place for an overnight stay. The girl did not know how to find a way out of this situation, and the prince told Kucher that he could go to the tavern with the stable. When the coachman left, the young man turned to the girl and said that they had no choice, and they will have to go to the monastery. The Duchess was surprised by his words. At first, she thought that she misheard and asked the young man whether they really had to go to the monastery. The young man showed the girl a direction in which she needs to see his head. The girl raised her head and began to carefully peer into the dark sky. When her eyes began to be better distinguished in the dark, she noticed a wooden sign suspended on iron chains. The word monastery was written on this tablet, which implied that it was somewhere behind it. Both travelers began to peer carefully, which was hiding behind the darkness under the sign. They had no other way out. How to immediately go where the table with the inscription pointed out to them. City twilight gave way to complete darkness. Rarely in what window the light was still burning. Everything looked pretty ominous. The travelers did not even notice that from one of the gateway they carefully observed them. They were not up to that. They also did not see, as if from around the corner, the face of another person who began to observe them leaned out. The Duchess felt not at ease. The atmosphere around seemed so gloomy and frightening to her. The girl was so scary at that moment that she decided to grab her hands on the hand of the Crown Prince. When the Duchess hugged the young man's hand, he asked her what she was doing. At that moment, she felt as if lightning struck her. She wanted to scream in pain. The girl flew away from the young man how the tennis ball from the racket flies. The Duchess began to tremble. She thought she had committed a crime because she touched a member of the imperial family without his permission. To great surprise, the young Duchess the Prince did not even bother to turn in her direction, but simply said so as not to stick to him. The girl asked for forgiveness, insulted by his words and attitude. Then, it seems, it became a little easier for her because she spent several days with him. The young Duchess thought she was still to tell the prince. She really wanted to immediately explain with him. Walking after the young man, she told him that she was scared and she did not want to offend him in any way. The Crown Prince silently walked forward without saying a word, and the girl tried to keep up with him. Suddenly, the young man stopped, peering into the distance. He said that it seems that they had already come to place. Still not recovering from the latest events, the girl began to peer in the same direction. The young man and the girl found themselves in front of the church. Against the backdrop of the starry sky, the bell tower with a cross that was burning on it was clearly distinguishable. It looks like it was a monastery. The young man stood without stepping. It seemed that something was excited. The Duchess standing behind a young man thought why he was not moving on. Then deciding that there was nothing more to wait, she stepped forward and thought that this time she would be bolder. And he must follow her. The young man still remained standing still. When the prince noticed that his fellow traveler decided to move forward, he immediately ordered her to stop and grabbed her hand. The Duchess asked the young man if he was not afraid. After all, he himself asked him not to touch him anymore. Answering the girl's question, the prince said that for some reason he has a bad foreboding. The girl could not understand this. She asked why right now he has a bad foreboding. She also said that she was very scary. The young man said that he did not mean this. In his opinion, something was wrong with the monastery. He showed towards the place to which they moved, and said that the light was not burning in the monastery. Beniti was forced to agree with him. She became even more scary, and she pressed as much as possible to the hand of the Crown Prince. The girl was so scary that she forgot that the prince did not like it, and another hand pulled the prince to her. The young man tried to remove the girl's hand and said that she needed to stay here and wait for him. It seems to be not destined to come true. In vain, he tried to get rid of the girl's hands. Standing in front of the entrance to the monastery, the girl and young man continued to push. It might seem that for a moment he became the winner in this struggle, pushing off the Duchess from himself. But then the girl clutched with both hands at the young man's cloak, not going to let him go. He asked the Duchess how such a coward as she decided to escape from home. The girl replied that it was very dangerous to go where there is no light. She did not consider herself fearful, but it was necessary to be careful. The young man replied that all this looks strange, so you need to go and scout why there is no light. The young Duchess wanted to scream in response to him that he was a hereditary prince, and he should not endure himself such a danger. The girl began to hold the prince's hand. She thought that thanks to her, the search group could not pick him up. But now she did not know what would happen to him in the future. And besides, looking into the face of the prince, she thought that someone already wanted to kill him. The Duchess remembered that her father always exalted Karzan. He believed that such a person is born once for 1,000 years. Unfortunately, he was not alone in his opinion. Many still thought in exactly the same way. Therefore, all the people had no choice but to grieve. The girl thought she would not allow someone to kill the prince. She had to keep the promise given to his sister princess. She pulled the prince by the edge of the cloak and said that it was better for them to spend the night on the street. She asked him not to go to this terrible place. The prince replied that he must go there. Not seeing another way out, the girl grabbed the prince with both hands by the body and began to squeeze very much in her arms. The young man, as usual, froze after touching anyone to his body. Holding it with both hands, the girl continued to say that you could not go there. The prince asked her how she dared to touch him. Suddenly, their struggle was stopped. The young man and the girl heard the voice of the man who turned to them, and at the same time turned in his direction. In front of them stood a young man with an empty bucket in his hand, who said that now everyone was forbidden to approach the monastery. The tired travelers simultaneously asked the young man at the same time why it was impossible to get to the monastery. The stranger explained to them that all the monks in the monastery died after they ate a sick pig. Then he continued and said that their bodies are still inside, therefore no one was allowed to enter. The young duchess began to remember something from her past life. It seemed to her that she had already heard about it. In this monastery, the plague began, and its consequences were terrible for others. No one could avoid death. In total, the plague took the lives of about 50 people. The duchess also knew that Rosalie came to this disease covered by the disease. Everything was in order with the girl, and she did not become infected. Realizing that they were more afraid of nothing more, the prince turned to the young man with the question of what he was doing here at such a later time. In response, the young man showed them an empty bucket and said that his sister was hungry, and therefore he went for water. The travelers became interested in how he was going to feed the girl with water. They did not slow to ask him about it. The stranger answered them that this can hardly satisfy hunger, but at least you can fill the stomach with water. When the young man was about to leave, the prince asked him to wait. He came up with something. Getting a knot from behind a cloak, he threw him into the hands of a young man. At the same time, he informed the surprised person that it was crackers, although they are strict and tasteless, but still they could satisfy hunger. The young man asked why he was given these crackers. In response, the prince told him that this is just a fee for the information received from him. The mysterious stranger stared at the figures of the two young men and girls standing opposite him. After short thoughts, he invited them to follow him. The young duchess looked inquiringly at the prince. She was interested to hear his opinion on whether they should follow this stranger. Without saying a word in response, he headed for the young man. The girl was forced to move after him. During the journey, she thought about why the prince again became so silent. It was as if he had gained water in his mouth. After a couple of minutes, the travelers came to their destination. There they saw a series of cozy, lined-up houses. In the kitchen of one of the buildings, a meeting with a sweet girl was waiting for them. She was very delighted to meet with travelers. The joyful sister of the stranger was indefatigably chatting. She was delighted that they had guests in their house. The young man who brought the duchess and prince invited them to be placed as comfortable as possible in their modest house. The young man asked her sister if she was hungry. Then he gave her a bundle with crackers and said that he received it from their guests. The girl, delighted by such a desired food, came into a state of delight and tasted crackers. Then the young mistress of the house thanked the travelers for their treats. Beniti looked at her brother and sister in bewilderment. For some reason, they seemed to her familiar. Tightly rummaging in her head, the girl tried to remember where her hospitable owners were known to her. Then the young man who brought the travelers said that in all this turmoil, he forgot to introduce himself to them. The young man said his name is Reiki Hemmels. The young duchess immediately remembered what she had not been able to recall for so long. It was a brother and sister with purple hair from the Hemmels family. The girl thought that she did not expect to meet them in this place. The duchess looked at her brother and sister with surprise. They were familiar to her in a past life. When she received the title of the bride of the hereditary prince, she was preparing for the wedding. The days of its preparation for the future event were held. In between classes, she walked with a crown prince. During one walk, as usual, the prince left her herself, and the girl was forced to catch up with him. She looked sadly at how the young man is moving further from her. Hurrying as soon as possible to catch up with the young man, the girl came to stone. He treacherously lay on a stone lawn. As a result of an immediate fall, the young duchess injured her leg. It was difficult for her to get to her feet. With an undisguised resentment, the duchess looked at how her future husband retires further from her. Sitting on the ground, she felt terribly, lonely, and abandoned by everyone. There was no one who could help her, and the one who, in her opinion, was obliged to do this was deleted further. The crown prince, as always, did not pay any attention to her. Since there was nowhere to wait for help and no one from, the girl tried to get out of the ground herself. And then help appeared from where the girl did not expect to get her at all. One of the officers of the Imperial Army addressed her with the question of whether she was in order. He held out his huge hand in a white glove to help her. His help was completely unnecessary. Sir Rake always had a smile of a sweet and shy guy. With his appearance, he quickly attracted the interlocutor to himself. But despite his innocent image, he was a knight with the frightening skills that accompanied Karzan. The young man possessed the skills of a real killer. Without hesitation, he could kill everyone who could threaten his prince. His younger sister, Jenny, was also an outstanding fighter. If she was inferior to her brother in force, she compensated for this with her dexterity. The girl knew that after the death of the crown prince, the brother and sister of the software tried to bring the Duchess family to the Duke of Kubaran. But as a result, both the brother and sister died. All these memories swept in the head of Bettini. The young Duchess watched with pity how her brother and sister jokingly fight for the crackers donated by the crown prince. The girl was very sorry because she knew that they had already died once because of her. Suddenly, a joke fight ended. As a result, her sister lost crackers and now held on to her head. The young man with purple hair went to the travelers and asked them what their name was. At the sight of food, he completely forgot about the rules of decency. Without thinking twice, the prince said that his name is Kar. His companion, stammering, decided to call herself the name of her beloved maid and said that her name was Tasha. The young man who sheltered them said that he is very pleased to meet them. He noted that his guest has a very beautiful name. Then the young man invited them to be located. He immediately stated that the young man would sleep in his bed. The night in the house of the hospitable brother and sisters went unnoticed. The rays of the morning sun began to break through the house through the small window. It turned out that they slept for a long time. The young Duchess was still sleeping in the same bed with her new girlfriend with purple hair. It seemed that they would sleep until dinner, but suddenly the girl was awakened by loud voices that sounded from the street. It seems that someone started a quarrel there. Both girls carefully began to listen to the voices from the courtyard. It seems that the case took a bad turn. In the middle of the sidewalk on the street stood a red-haired man who turned to a young man. He said that they would die anyway from hunger. Then he added that it is better to send Jenny to the Viscount as a maid. His interlocutor was the brother of the named girl. He told the arrived that he was not going to give his sister. He asked their uninvited guest, "Does he think that the young man does not understand what will happen next?" The red-haired man somehow looked like a hamster. He missed his ears a question of a young man with purple hair, but the young man was not going to be silent. He told the man that if he gives his sister, she was waiting for a miserable future. When she becomes an adult, she will either be made by a concubine or sold to another noble family. Looking intently into the eyes of the guest, the young man said that he knew that they promised to pay for it. To his words, a fat Bruquet replied that it seems that the young man still did not understand the whole situation. How he could only think that he wanted to sell the girl. The young man with fists in his hands was ready to protect his young sister. Both girls carefully listened to a conversation that came to them from the street. The interlocutor of the young man said that their parents died because of a sick pig from the monastery. Then the young Duchess, in amazement, heard that all the possessions of her brother and sisters would now be taken away. Sitting at the head of the bed, the girls continued to listen to the voices. The Duchess was sorry for the poor orphans. She heard from a conversation that there would be no one else to protect them. The arrogant and evil man continued to speak. He asked the young man how they are now going to survive. He informed him that if they could not pay the rent, they will simply drive them away. In response from indignation, the young man shouted loudly. It seemed that his piercing was not heard not only the whole street, but also the city. A red-haired man, stunned by the cry of a young man, was even forced to close his ears with his palms. The young man took a few steps towards the man along the stone pavement and said that he and his sister were doing everything possible. Reiki looked to his uninvited guest in the face and said that they themselves would deal with everything without outside help. Then he informed him that he was allowed to engage in agriculture and asked him to get away. He was upset by such a turn of their conversation. Suspending with his teeth, he stated that he had come to them, because no one else would help them. Then the fat man grabbed the young man by the heap of the shirt and began to pull to him. He said that the young man was already completely insolent if he dared to talk to him like that. Jenny, who heard the whole conversation on the street, could not restrain her tears and now cried in the arms of her newly acquired girlfriend. On the street around two conversations, a crowd began to gather, attracted by loud screams and a brawl. It came to a real fight. The young man, who initially had to be defeated in her, looked in surprise at the man who was lying at his feet. And then the young man with purple hair noticed how his guest, holding a doll in his hands, came forward. He did not even understand what happened before that. The red-haired, who looked like a hamster, was lying on paving slabs. He was knocked down, suddenly appearing a young man. The prince had a doll in his hands. People who began to gather around even earlier could not understand what happened. Some of them asked if this man fell, frightened by the dolls. In the same way, Reiki could not understand anything. He looked inquiringly at the man whom he was hospitably sheltered yesterday. The boy saved from violence could not understand how his guest was able to cope with this strong enemy. The prince held his doll in his hands and stared at the face of the man who was lying in front of him on the sidewalk. Then the young man leaned toward the lying, handed the doll in his face, and ordered to die. Perhaps no one expected this outcome of the match except the crown prince. The fat man jumped to his feet and began to run away from all his feet. Both youths looked after him. For everything that happened at that time on the street, two girls looked intently from the window. Both eyes had anxiety for the fate of the boys who were in the yard at that time. The young duchess realized that it was magic. She had already met her in a past life. One of these cases occurred when she met a snake near the office of the crown prince. Later, the girl found out that this snake was created by the magic of the prince from the usual tape. The girl again tried to understand why the prince did not like her so much. She did not understand his motives, but even despite the hatred that he felt for his bride, the neglect that the prince constantly showed her, and despite the fact that he was constantly cold to his future wife, the young duchess thought that, despite all this, she continued to endure him. While the girl was considering all this, her friend escaped from her arms. Jenny quickly left the planned duchess and ran away to her brother. She was eager to make sure that everything was in order with him. Having run into the street, she immediately rushed to her brother and began to feel him and ask if everything was in order with him. He replied that the girl had absolutely no need to worry. A little to the side of the rejoicing brother and sister, the crown prince remained to stand. He tried to analyze everything recently what happened. The young man looked out the window of the house in which they spent this night and saw a girl who looked at him intently. The views of the young man and his companions met for a minute. And at that moment, the girl realized that she could endure this young man because she liked him. Just as she began to hate him in a past life, he began to attract her now. Changes in his appearance were insignificant. But having talked with the prince closer, the duchess understood his character much better. For the duchess, only one thing was incomprehensible. The girl could not understand why the prince hates her so much. While the prince was busy with his thoughts, his brother and sister finished their conversation. The young man was interested in how his night guest could save him. He addressed this question to a young man. Instead of the prince, the girl answered, whose steps they very soon heard, sounding along the ringing pavement. The duchess came up and said that it was magic. Hearing her words, the prince immediately frowned and looked strictly at the girl. The girl standing with him was very surprised, and her brother said that he knew that only the chosen ones can use magic. The young man turned to the prince and said that he was very cool. He knows how to use magic. The prince was forced to modestly answer that he was just a wizard of the level itself. His knowledge in magic is very insignificant. Around the shock of young people, an even greater crowd began to gather. These were curious onlookers who decided to look at what had happened. They went out to the scream because it was very noisy. The prince was forced to ask them what was happening here. When people began to diverge slowly, a little girl approached them and, turning to the prince, asked him to give her a doll. The young man looked at her questioningly. It seems that he did not quite understand what this girl wants from him, and the little prankster still remained standing next to the prince, pointing to the doll in his hand, and asked her to give her. At the same time, she called the young man uncle. The duchess and brother and sister, standing next to the prince, began to laugh quietly. They were amused by the girl's appeal to the prince. In their eyes, he was not at all like an uncle. The crown prince only tightly squeezed the doll in his hand in response to all the claims of the girl. It seems that he was not going to part with his toy. The girl told the young man that he is already an adult, and he did not need a doll. But he still refused to give her a toy. Then the girl tried to take away the toy by force. This did not work on the prince at all. He squeezed the doll in his hand even more tightly. All the efforts of the little girl were in vain. When the little girl inadvertently touched the body of the crown prince, he stepped back from her and shouted loudly as she dares to touch him. The young man raised the toy high above the girl's head, and she tried in vain to get her, jumping in useless attempts. Then the young man already raised the doll over his head, and the girl ran around him demanding to give her a toy. The young duchess carefully watched everything that was happening with the prince. Her mood rose sharply. She realized that the young man could not tell anyone that he is a crown prince. At the same time, brother and sister could not understand the reason for the joyful mood of their guest. They thought that she was laughing due to the fact that the child called her companion uncle. It seems that the prince is already tired of this struggle with a small child. The concern was replaced by rage in his eyes. It was noticeable that the young man was angry, and the little girl still stood with her hands raised and did not understand why an adult did not want to give her an unnecessary toy, in her opinion, for him. The emotions of the three young people who observed this scene also changed. Fear and concern came to replace fun. People who had not yet had time to leave after the end of the previous brawl began to carefully observe how the young man did not give the doll to a little girl. The girl who desired the toy, the girl stood and could not do anything. She never managed to get the doll she liked. Seeing that all her attempts were in vain, the little girl began to cry loudly in front of her uncle with a doll in her hand. The stubborn young man never wanted to share his toy with anyone. Then the crying girl decided to calm their mistress with purple hair. The girl crouched next to the girl and said that she has something better for the girl. She quickly went inside in the house and returned with something in her hand. Then Jenny showed this girl, and she seemed to be a little calmed down. The girl decided to give the girl a scarf, which she, according to her, embroidered herself. The prince standing behind carefully watched the girl with a little girl. It seems that he was unusual to see such a scene. More recently, a roaring girl gratefully rushed to the girl's neck and began to hug her. The young duchess thought that a normal person was immediately visible. She was completely unaware of how the prince did not know how to communicate with the children. When the sun rose a little higher, the rest of the houses of this town became visible. The whole city literally hid the foliage of trees. I must say that for the trip, the weather on this day was just beautiful. The coachman who rested overnight in the tavern did not fail to call in his passengers. He was already ready for departure. Now his passengers have come to say goodbye to their hospitable owners. The crown prince and the girl who had already received the best clothes stood in front of a carriage approaching. The mistress of the house in which they received the knight stood in front of his gate and thanked for the gifts received. She said that soup with pancakes was very tasty, and also thanked for spices. The crown prince answered her that there was nothing special about this, and there is no gratitude. He said that he always takes spices with him on a journey. Since they almost got to the place, he decided to give them to. The young man decided to thank his savior from a stupid girl, having prepared his crown dish for them. The young duchess carefully watched everything and thought that the prince was completely unable to communicate normally with people. The brother of the young mistress held out his hand and thanked him for his assistance. The young man approached the crown prince and said that he would never forget the help he had rendered. The young man answered his hospitable owner that he would never forget anything. The young people who became friends in such a short time shook hands. It was noticeable that good relations were established between them. Between the boys, finally, some kind of lively conversation began. The young duchess, standing by the carriage, watched everything. She was also very grateful to her brother and sister. It is not known where they would spend this night if they had not been sheltered by poor orphans. At the same time, the girl remembered what was in her past. The prince and Rake had a special relationship. Immediately after the death of the crown prince, he was distraught. The girl thought about if she could not change anything, then it would happen again. And she did not want this at all, like the death of his family. The young duchess, for the last time, looked out the carriage window and saw Jenny and Reiki waving after them. The girl waved to her newfound friends. Suspending with wheels, the carriage continued its way. Inside her, the girl thought that she should do everything so that their tragic fate would not be repeated again. The duchess hoped that she would succeed. Following the departing carriage, brother and sister looked regretfully. They were sorry to say goodbye to these good people who helped them in difficult times. Finally, they arrived in Kubaran to their destination. Since he was high in the mountains, he met his guests with cold and snow. It was very unusual after warm and sunny weather. Grateful for the excellent service, the crown prince paid the coachman for the trip. In response, he stated that he had never had such pleasant passengers. During their conversation, the duchess still could not warm up. As soon as she left the carriage, she immediately felt an ice cold. She tried to warm herself with a warm stone, pressing it to her chest. But unfortunately, this did not help, and the girl continued to tremble. It is time to say goodbye to the passengers of the carriage. It seems that here they were destined to go in different directions. They had no time for long farewells. Everyone was in a hurry about his own business. The young duchess yawned and said that she had a good time with the young man. She advised him to be careful and try not to climb anywhere. It seemed that the prince was also worried about his recent companion. In response, he also asked her to be careful and said that many strange things were happening on the streets. After these words, the young man turned around and went somewhere into the darkness. The girl looked at him in bewilderment. The crown prince jumped up to the unknown horse and galloped into it into the distance. It seems that everything was prepared in advance. He seems to be very lucky. The Duchess sadly looked after the prince. How did she envy him at that moment? In a few minutes, he may be warm. The girl thought about the last words of the prince and could not understand whether it was a good wish for her or not. The girl was constantly yawning from her cold. Neither warm clothes nor warm stone could save her. The young duchess remained standing in the middle of the square. At some moment, she realized the severity of her position. Now she stood at night in the middle of someone else's city completely herself. She felt very lonely. A sense of fear in the girl was replaced by anger in relation to the young man who left her here. She thought that Karzan is abnormal, since she left her here alone. The Duchess thought about how to leave her alone here. She began to tremble from the cold that she thought that she could freeze here to death. She was forced to throw away a hot stone when he cooled. The girl tried to go as quickly as possible to get to the destination. And finally, she succeeded. Finding herself in front of the gates of the Duke's estate, she turned to the guard and informed who she was and where she came from. Also, a man who was dead at the post was not going to miss her so easily. He asked why she thinks that anyone can be met with the Duke. He threatened the girl that he would call a soldier if she did not leave. In response, the Duchess again asked her to let her in. Trembling from the cold, she stated that she would die from hypothermia. The Duchess again turned to the guardian manner to a person with the words, "I have to explain everything to you. I had circumstances to dress like that, but I really have Beniti Raishi, the daughter of the Duke of Philip Raishi, a student of the Duke Ducro." The girl first spoke quietly, but then powerful notes appeared in her voice. She decided to change her prayers to the order. In a powerful voice, she ordered the guard to go and say that the Duchess had arrived. It seemed that the guard was impressed by the words and the tone of the young special. He did not object, but he was in no hurry to go somewhere. Then the guard asked the girl to wait a bit and said that he needed to check her words. Someone behind the Duchess also said that he wanted to know the truth about the young guest of the Duke. Beniti looked around to see who it could be. In the eyes of a young girl, surprise was frozen at the sight of a person what he saw. Already someone, and she certainly could not imagine the prince here. Before the Duchess was the one with whom she had recently said goodbye. The crown prince smiled and said that he wanted to check whether it was or not. The girl realized that the prince could hear her whole conversation with the guard. Or perhaps he only now appeared here. Looking at the girl walking in front of the guard, the prince thought that his recent companion forgot here. The young Duchess was haunted by anxious thoughts. She thought about how much the prince heard. She would not want him to know who she was. Maybe he at least did not hear about her family. At least for now. But it seems that the girl's dreams were not destined to come true. Everything happened exactly the opposite of how she expected. The prince asked her precisely about what family she was coming from. Then the young man noted that she was one of the finalists for the role of the bride of the crown prince. He asked her. In fact, she is the same Beniti Raishi. The Duchess thought she was now caught. She was stuck into a serious situation from which she could hardly find a way out now. She could not now understand how she could admit that, being a potential bride of the prince, she escaped from the house and violated the order of the imperial family. Reflections with difficulty were given a girl frozen in the cold. But then a great solution came to her mind. She remembered that the crown prince had not yet revealed her personality. The girl remembered how he answered in a carriage to her question. Why would he leave the capital? He never once informed her who he was. The young man only said that he had left because he did not want to engage in someone. He explained his flight by the fact that he wanted to avoid engagement. The Duchess decided that now she has only one way out. She needs to pretend that they are not familiar. Therefore, without hesitating for a second, she confirmed her personality. The young man carefully looked at the girl standing in front of him. If he was surprised by her words, he did not show at all. The prince continued to be silent. Deciding to go on an active offensive, the Duchess asked the young man that she was a candidate for the bride of the crown prince. She thought that she herself could tell everyone who he was really. Deciding that she was able to protect herself, the girl fell silent. She thought that the danger from the crown prince passed. She shouldn't have been afraid of him yet. Suddenly, a man with glasses and a warm coat with a fur collar appeared from the gate of the estate and asked what happened to them and why they arrived. This was the Duke, the owner of the local estate. The man said that he was informed of the arrival of the young Duchess to him, which, by the way, is incredibly happy, but worries about the reasons for her arrival. Still next to the prince, the Duchess was again worried. She did not know how the Duke would perceive the news that she arbitrarily left her parental house. The young Duchess decided that now she was finally stuck. Everything would have happened completely differently if there were no potential groom nearby. In greeting, she bowed to the Duke and said that they had not seen each other for a very long time. The Duke of Kubaran replied that he was very glad to see her and asked why she came here with the crown prince. Although the girl from the very beginning recognized her travel companion, she did not expect the whole truth about him to be discovered now. She was not ready for the reaction to the words of the Duke. She needed to think everything properly. But unfortunately, there was a catastrophically lacked time. Not hearing her answer, the Duke was forced to repeat his question again. The young Duchess gazed intently towards the Crown Prince, choosing the words necessary for the answer. At this time, the Crown Prince was closely watching the girl and waited for what she would do or say in response to the words of the owner of the local estate. She thought about why he was staring at her. She was unpleasant to feel the gaze of a young man on herself. And then suddenly the girl smiled delightedly. As she thought, she still managed to find a solution to her problem. It seems that the girl could become a very good actress. Throwing her hands up in surprise to her cheeks, she cried out, was the hereditary prince himself now. She hoped that she would be believed. The young Duchess stood between her two interlocutors. The youngest of them carefully watched the girl, and the other asked the Duchess, did she not know this before? The girl smiled slyly, covering her lips with her palm in a cunning grin. And the Crown Prince stood and thought about whether she really did not recognize him or he was very good at his camouflage. The Duke, who looked at this scene, immediately understood everything. He invited them to go inside the palace and deal with the situation at dinner. The Duke had a huge, beautiful palace. And although it was still evening now, but in all its windows, the light continued to burn brightly. The Duke promised his guests that they would immediately prepare a bath and dinner for them. As soon as the invitation arrived, the Crown Prince immediately moved quickly behind the owner of the house. The young Duchess walked after him and could not understand why the prince pulled away from her so quickly. The girl again thought about what was happening. She did not want the prince to learn about her origin. She liked their old relations, and she hoped that they would continue. Looking in the back of the removing prince, the girl thought that now she could not talk to him outside the formal situation. After all, he learned that she is one of the applicants for the place of his wife. On the way to the house, the girl was thinking about whether now, after a close acquaintance with her, the prince would set a snake on her again. Or perhaps she has now become more cute. Travelers, after a long and difficult road, were able to accept the warm bathroom, they were invited to dinner. In the dining room, they were waiting for a richly set table with different dishes. The hospitable Duke immediately suggested that the Crown Prince begin dinner. He said that although he was not preparing for the arrival of important guests, his modest dinner should satisfy them. But a high-ranking guest seems to have completely lost his appetite. The young man did not start eating, but again asked the Duke if this girl is really Beniti Raishi. Carefully glancing at the prince through his glasses, the Duke asked whether he really did not recognize this girl. It seems that this surprised the man. The Crown Prince slowed down with his answer to the Duke, sorting out something in his memory. Sitting at the table with two men, the girl tried not to pay special attention to the conversation between them. She just wanted to eat calmly. And it seemed to her there was nothing to discuss her modest person. The prince thought about the question of the owner of the house. Then, having frowned, he said that he remembers her blonde. Therefore, it was difficult for him to find out the Duchess. The prince stared at the girl sitting near him and said that her hair color had changed after that day. Hearing his words, the Duchess suddenly stopped eating. She was very surprised by the words of the young man. She did not understand how he could find out about it. All her loved ones knew that initially the Duchess was a blonde. But then, as they grow older, the color of her hair began to change to silver. The girl was not clear what the prince had in mind when he said, after that day. It even seemed to her that he had already told her something like this in her past life. There was a case when he suddenly crept up to her from behind, and this very much scared the Duchess. Later, it turned out that he just wanted to turn to her with an unexpected issue. The Crown Prince asked the Duchess whether her hair was always so silver. At that time, she answered him in the same way as now. The color of her hair changed over time as he grows older. The question of the crown prince was very surprised by the young duchess. After all, before the prince did not give her at all and tried to ignore her in every possible way. At that time, it seemed to the girl that her answer was puzzled and upset by the crown prince. After him, he turned and went somewhere in the depths of the palace. This time, he was not the opportunity to get up and just leave. He said that everything was clear to him and continued to sit at the dining table. The girl stared at the face of the prince sitting opposite him and thought about whether they saw him before this meeting in the carriage. Finally, the prince decided to answer the duke's question. He said that from their last meeting, the duchess changed. Her round face was losing weight and became like, damn it. She also changed her hair color, so he did not recognize her at once. The duke only laughed in response to the words of his young guest. He said that probably the prince had not seen the duchess since she was 8 years old. The young man replied that he no longer remembers when it was. He added that he heard that the girl was very ill. Unlike the young man, the duke quickly managed with the dinner proposed to him. Meanwhile, he noticed that in childhood, a young man and the girl were very close, and he is very sorry that they had not seen each other for so long. The young duchess was very surprised by the words of the owner of the house sheltered. She could not even think that she was once close with the crown prince. She thought that for some reason she did not remember anything about it. The crown prince again deepened into his thoughts. It seemed that, like a girl, he was stunned in their sudden meeting after such a long separation. Then suddenly the young man turned to the girl and asked her to raise his right hand. She immediately listened to him and fulfilled his request. She did not understand what was happening now. Then the prince ordered just as suddenly that she raised her left hand. As for the first time, the duchess did not dare to try the young man. In turn, she raised up the right or left hand by order of the crown prince. The next request of the crown prince was even more unexpected. He asked the girl to pinch her cheeks, and then he asked her if she was sick more. The duchess could not understand what he wanted from her. She replied that she was not sick since there was a fever in childhood, and she added that all her memories are very blurry before. The prince nervously tugged in a fork in his hand, choosing words for his next question. Having gazed intently into the face of the duchess, he asked her whether this is that she forgot about him. The duchess was surprised by the question of the young man and did not know what to answer him. She thought that perhaps he hated her because she did not remember anything. After all, in a past life, he asked her the same. But despite all her doubts, the duchess answered the prince that she completely did not remember what was before her fever. The next question of the young man was even more unexpected and frightening to her. He asked the duchess why she escaped from the house under a stranger name. Just like the duchess, the owner of the house in which they were now was surprised. He turned to her with the question, "Is it true that she escaped from home?" The duchess in her head was looking for an answer to the questions to her. She began to get rid of. She wanted to say that she does not understand what was at stake, but this would hardly help her. Then the crown prince turned to her again and asked why his potential bride is now here, so far from the capital, and not at the ceremony. Without thinking twice over his words, the duchess asked the prince what he was doing here. According to her, he should also be at the ceremony now. After all, his presence is also necessarily there. In response, the crown prince told the girl that since he had not seen her, her heavy character has not changed at all for the better. While those who have dinner were talked among themselves, the maid entered the dining room and asked the duke if she needed to wash it too. The duke and his guests carefully looked at the thing that the maid was holding in their hands. Seeing brought by the servant, the crown prince immediately wrapped his head in the opposite direction. His unexpected travel companion was surprised to peer at the little thing that had familiar to her. The duke turned to the crown prince and asked his highness if he was still this doll with him. Then he asked the girl if she remembered this toy. The duke ordered that the maid wash the doll and then asked Beniti if she remembered how Karzan gave this doll. A stunned girl looked in surprise at the toy, which was familiar to her from the events that had recently occurred. She could not imagine that once the doll belonged to her. The duke, having felt something was wrong, tried to change the topic of the conversation, but alas, it was to no avail. The girl was also interested in the question of why she gave her to the prince. She would really like to understand her motives. With him, she turned to a young man. The duchess demanded that for an immediate answer. The young man, who had already begun to eat food, replied that he was unknown. Then he added that now the doll belongs to him, and she should forget about her. The decree received, the maid went to fulfill it. In the dining room at that time, deep silence reigned. The duchess indulged in memories. Before her eyes, the face of the prince appeared again, who did not want to give the doll to a little girl. She again survived the same emotions that she had at the sight of a struggle for a toy of an adult man and a small child. The Duchess told the prince that it seemed to her that this doll was very important to him. The young man continued to eat as if nothing had happened. He said that he simply did not want to give the thing that belongs to him. He does not care about whom he received it as a gift. In response to his words, the Duchess calmly said that she did not even doubt it. Sitting all this time silently and listening to both of his interlocutors, the Duke asked His Highness if he had already found notes. The young man replied that he had not found it yet, but continues, as before, to do this. The young Duchess was very excited by the mention of mysterious notes, the search for which the hereditary prince is engaged in. She thought that perhaps we were talking about witch notes, about those notes that were able to return it to the past. The Duchess thought that the words of the princess who had spoken to her in a prison cell were true. Due to the fact that Karzan found these notes, she was able to return to the past. It seemed that the mention of notes led to the fact that the prince remembered something yet. In his eyes, his mental activity was red at that moment. The young man asked the owner who sheltered them why he had not seen Rose's grandmother anywhere. After thinking a little, the Duke answered the young man that the nanny was forced to leave their mansion. It seems that this news was very excited about the young man. He even got up from his chair and began to walk around the room. Then the young man moved slightly closer to the Duke and asked why and how he could let that house leave. The Duke also became gloomy at the mention of the nanny. It seems that his words were not easy for him. He said that he felt that he had held the nanny for too long, so then he decided that it was time to let her go. The last word that the prince heard even more upset him. The owner of the house said that he was forced to release his nanny with Terras. The young Duchess who heard this word was also very amazed. She has already heard this name repeatedly earlier. Was it really about the deceased former empress? Everyone knew that the Duke Ducro had one daughter. Her name was Terras, and she was the empress of the Reynos Empire. The girl herself never met her. But according to rumors that reached her, it was known that the empress was a very kind person. Unfortunately for all the inhabitants of the empire, she died, not having time to give birth to the emperor of the air. Also, the young person was known from the books she read that in a week the Karzan mother became the next empress. Then the girl thought that, it seemed, the woman mentioned by both men was the nanny of the previous empress. The girl looked at the crown prince and could not understand why he was so upset because of this. The young man wiped his mouth with a napkin and informed them that he would already go to rest. The Duchess looked at the young man and could not understand what could be associated with the nanny of the previous empress. The young man silently left the dining room. The Duchess thought that something was wrong here. All this looked very strange. The girl decided that it would be necessary to deal with everything later. The thoughts of the young person were interrupted by her elderly interlocutor. He turned to her and said that perhaps it was time for her to go, to sleep if she ate. When the girl already got up and was going to go to her bedroom, the Duke added that she would have to get up early tomorrow morning to go home. After the hardships and deprivations of recent days on the trip, the night for a girl went very quickly. A sunny and frosty morning arrived unnoticed. The young Duchess was to return to the capital again. The girl who woke up and well-rested during sleep found new clothes in her bedroom. Dressing and opening the door to the corridor, she carefully stepped on his polished parquet. There she was waiting for a meeting with someone whom she now absolutely did not want to see. She in vain amused herself with the hope that she would be able to quietly escape from the ducal palace. Behind the door stood a crown prince. The Duchess thought about whether he really got up and came to spend her. But she asked. The girl's girlfriend was completely different. She asked how His Highness was sleeping. Hearing from the prince that everything was in order with him, the girl informed him that she needed to go now. She already needs to go on the road immediately. In response, the prince asked for forgiveness and said that she would have to wait a bit. The young man blocked her path and began to approach her quickly. Approaching her at the distance of an outstretched arm, the prince put his hand to the forehead of the young Duchess. As it usually happened, the girl was very surprised by the actions of a young man. She did not understand what he needed again from her. She was completely unaware of what was happening now. One hand of the young man remained pressed to the forehead of the Duchess and put the other prince to his head. Suddenly, for the prince as well as for herself, the girl laughed loudly. She thought that, although he is a hereditary prince, but he should not touch others without permission. Hearing a laughter, the prince stared at his recent travel companion. He did not understand the reason for the girl's so excited mood. The Duchess thought why some nonsense was carrying from yesterday. She was always very reasonable, and now it was as if she had been replaced. Also unexpectedly, the young man turned around and went away. Leaving, he said that they would soon meet at the ceremony. Fought by the words of the young man, the Duchess was not able to answer him anything. A dumb question froze in her eyes. The prince, meanwhile, added that she was not very surprised, because at the ceremony he would look a little different than it looks now. And the young man said that he has black hair and red eyes. Beniti looked in surprise after the departing young man. She hoped so that the ceremony was cancelled. And based on his words, it turned out that she still had to attend her. The Duchess was in despair. She did not understand why they should meet at the ceremony. Was it not supposed to exclude her? Yes, they were just obliged to do it. For this, she ran away from the house. Then the girl calmed down a little and put her thoughts in order. She decided that she would not go to this damn ceremony. No, when the girl left the palace, a harnessed carriage was already waiting for his gates. It seems that everything was already prepared for her long journey. In parting, the Duke asked her to convey hello to her father. He also asked to convey that he wanted to see him. The girl happily agreed to fulfill his requests. The Duchess comfortably settled in a soft seat inside the ducal carriage. It was very useful, her new, soft fur manteau. The door has not yet been closed, and she said goodbye to the hospitable host. The Duke had a rather unusual way of moving. Instead of ordinary horses, he used others who had wings on his backs. As soon as the coucher carriage waved his reins, the horses and carriage found themselves high above the city. On the way, the Duchess did not escape heavy thought, as usual. She ran away from the house, hoping that she would be excluded from the future ceremony. But to her, everything was only more complicated. The girl thought about why she and the prince talked well until she was 8 years old. Also, she was haunted by the thought why she gave him a doll. Exhaled by anxious thoughts, the girl looked out the window. But the cute landscapes flying below did not bother her at all. She was worried about thoughts about the crown prince. It seemed to the Duchess that this morning he sincerely worried about her. Otherwise, why did he need to touch her forehead? Finally, the girl decided to leave all the issues for later. Before doing something, she had to talk with her parents. It was necessary to ask them something. The first whom the Duchess saw in her home was her father, who jumped out. An excited man could not hide the emotions overwhelming at the sight of his daughter. He opened the front door wide and shouted loudly the name of the girl. The carriage with the daughter of the Duke landed right on his threshold. The coachman who delivered her opened the door for the girl, and she quickly got out of her. The girl could not yet understand what her reception in her parental house would be. The Duke quickly ran out of his palace, hurrying to meet his returning daughter. The servant approached the Duke, who came out of the palace, and handed the letter to him from his long-standing familiar mentor. It seems that the appearance of the Duke's servants very surprised the owner of the house. Without hesitation for a second, the Duke took the envelope with a letter of his hands, printed it, and immediately began to read carefully. It seemed to the girl that her father was not paying attention to her at all. It was the worst for her. All the attention of the man was absorbed by the letter received. He said to tell the Duke that he received his letter. Standing behind her father, the Duchess could not understand what was happening now. She was ready to expect anyone, but not to ignore her from her own father. When the father was able to free herself a little, the girl turned to him with a request for forgiveness. She herself understood that she had very upset her parents. The girl tried to explain to her father that she simply did not want to be a candidate. Therefore, she did not come up with anything better, how to just escape from home. It seems that the father did not quite understand her. The man told his daughter that she did not want to be a candidate for the bride of the crown prince. It seemed strange to him. The Duke stood, stepping from one leg to another. He told his daughter that she could not even imagine how much he was worried about this. Father took the Duchess by the hand and informed her that he had notified the imperial family that she was feeling bad, and therefore, he will not be able to go to the ceremony. The imperial family was forced to transfer everything. Still holding his daughter's hands, the man continued. He said that he understands his daughter's decision not to participate in the competition, but he does not know at all what they can do now. The Duchess thoughtfully listened to her father. She thought that it was no longer a fate to miss this ceremony. It seems that her father began to understand this. He looked at the girl with a prayer in his eyes and asked her forgiveness. He apologized to his daughter for sending her to where she did not want. In response, the Duchess told her father that he should not worry about her account. She added that he did enough for her, and for this she is very grateful to him and his mother. The girl was ready to burst into tears. As luck would have it, not one of her plans has come true. But this time she was not going to make the same mistake. While her father held her hand in his palms, the Duchess mentally promised him that this time she would definitely make her excluded from the contest of the bride's prince. While they agreed on everything with each other, a scream was heard from their palace. The female voice loudly called a young duchess by name. This cry belonged to the mother of the young duchess. Then the door of the palace opened again, and the girl and brother of the girl ran out into the street one by one. Both on their faces read obvious anxiety for the fate of a person dear to him. The worried all the time about where her daughter went did not slow down with the question of where the girl was. The son did not lag behind his mother. He asked the girl if she knew how they worried about her and worried about her absence in the house. Having calmed down a little, the Duchess began to look at her daughter's clothes. She noticed her warm outfit and asked her if she was in the north. The young Duchess affirmatively nodded in response. She remembered something and said that she definitely needs to ask her parents to ask. Standing in a small courtyard of the ducal palace, along with her parents and brother, the girl asked them whether she was already accidentally familiar with the crown prince. It seemed to the girl for a moment that her mother was numb. She stopped feeling her body with her fingers at the moment when she heard her question. The brother froze in the same way when his ears reached the girl's desire to learn more about her past. The Duke also looked depressed. He grabbed his head as if he had a sharp attack of migraine. Then, it seems, the Duchess came to her senses. The woman managed to come to her senses and said that she needed to go somewhere, referring to urgent affairs. Following her, the girl's brother said that he was also late for a meeting and said goodbye. The dumbfounded girl watched her relatives leave her as rapidly as they appeared recently in the yard. Only her father remained next to the girl. It seems that he was not quite pleased to listen to the question that sounded from her. The Duchess asked her father why her mother and Bahrain are behaving so strangely. The Duke invited the daughter to continue the conversation with him already inside the palace. He began his story by the fact that the girl probably knew that once the Emperor talked very closely with the Ducro Duke. The Duchess very carefully listened to the story of her father. He told her that he, as a student of the Duke, was also very often invited to the imperial palace. Stunned by her father's story, the girl heard that in childhood she very often saw with the crown prince precisely because her father was a frequent visitor to the imperial palace. The Duke slowly continued his story, not paying attention to the tea brought by their servant. It seems that the man was very excited by the topic of their conversation. When his story was already over, the girl asked his father what he knew about that day. She added that she became aware that it was on that day that her hair color began to change. The girl was wondering what happened that day. Father's gaze was very excited by the young Duchess. It seemed to her that the question was very difficult for the Duke. She was again forced to repeat the same question, already a little more persistently. As if preparing to answer, his father took a cup of tea and decided to drink a little out of it. He needed this pause, probably for thought. Having made another sip from the cup, the Duke began his story. He informed his daughter that before her birthday she had a strong fever, and she lost all the memories of this, and their conversation was accompanied by a tea party. The girl became interested in what caused her fever. In response, her father informed her that it seems to be some serious flu. For such a long time, he had already forgotten the details of her disease. The girl carefully thought about what she heard. From the words of the prince, it seemed to her that something special had happened that day. She thought that if her father was telling the truth, then why was the prince interested in her well-being? Did she look painful then? Putting a cup of tea on the table, the Duchess began to think what the next question to ask her father. She was very incomprehensible in his story. Gathering her spirit, the girl asked the Duke if he knew why the Duchess once gave her doll to the crown prince. It seemed to the girl for a moment that her father was fenced with this issue. He immediately asked her if she met with His Highness. The young Duchess said nothing in response. But through her eyes, her father noticed that she really met with the prince. The man said that now he understands where she got so many questions from. Father told the Duchess that when she was small, her mother made a doll for her, which was supposed to protect the girl from illnesses. But then the girl was a little girl, too kind, so she did not want the doll to hurt her instead. When, after a couple of days, the Duke was on a visit to the imperial palace, he noticed that the doll had gained a new owner. The girl decided to give her to the prince. The Duke said that he learned from the prince himself about the gift of his daughter. Then the man was interested in whether the prince still remembers that gift. The Duchess could not answer his question. She was glad that she was able to hear the whole story about this doll. Now everything that was connected with her has gained some kind of integrity. It seemed that she received answers to all her questions, but it seemed to her that there was some kind of lack of core in this. For some reason, she suspected her father that he did not tell her everything. It seemed very strange to her that after her question, her mother immediately ran away, citing some urgent matters. In the same way, his brother's words were that he was late for some kind of fictitious meeting. The girl thought that her relatives were clearly hiding something from her. It was very similar that they did not tell her something. Having analyzed once again everything he heard from the prince, and now from her father, the girl was definitely sure that she was not agreed by something. She vowed to herself that over time she finds everything to details. From the thought of the girl, her beloved maid appeared in the room. The eyes of the young person shone. It seemed that a moment for a moment and full-flowing streams were pouring from these eyes. The Duchess decided to talk with her servant. She told the girl that she knew that she was very worried with her mistress. But now she has no need to worry. All the troubles are behind. It seems that the girl was not at all up to talking with her mistress. She turned and began to leave the room. The girl told the mistress that she had prepared for her in a bath and she could already go there. Looking in her back, the Duchess thought that her maid seemed very angry with her. She thanked the girl for taking care of her and said that she would go to the bath now. A few minutes later, the Duchess enjoyed the warm bathroom. It seemed that warm, pure water could create a miracle. All the fatigue of the Duchess as a hand was removed. Suddenly, the girl started up from someone's touch. Frightened, she staggered sharply. It seems that someone decided to joke with her. Looking around, she saw her maid, who was now laughing joyfully. The Duchess thought that she specially decided to scare her. Seeing that her relationship with her friend began to improve, the Duchess asked the maid to forgive the maid to run away. She told her that she had every right to be angry with the mistress. Tasha, in response, said that she was not at all angry. Then she told the Duchess that she should understand how her mother was worried after her daughter suddenly disappeared from her father's house. The maid was eager to pester the mistress with her questions. She asked her what was happening to that. She was wondering why her lady did not want to engage with the prince when others could not even dream of this. In response to the question of the maid, the Duchess replied that she did not even know what to answer her. It seems that for this question, she herself has not yet been able to find an answer. The maid had a lot of questions for his returning mistress. She was wondering where she was able to go during the absence of a house. How much surprised the young girl's answer that she visited the north. She wanted to know what happened to her mistress on the road to the north. The young Duchess decided to satisfy the curiosity of her maid. But before telling everything, she made from that promise not to be angry with her anymore. The joyful and excited maid immediately promised the mistress not to do this anymore. She has long forgiven her beloved mistress. She was interested in literally everything. Sitting in a warm bath, the Duchess thought about why she would start her story about an amazing journey. She decided to start her story with how she arrived. The young Duchess could never have thought that her brother would wave her fist at her. But now this situation was happening. Thus, he wanted to punish her for unauthorized absence from the house. The young man said to his sister for running away. He asked her, "Can a young lady be such a fidget?" As soon as she decided to escape from the house at the age of 17, from the pain she experienced, the young Duchess was forced to sit down near her brother. She grabbed both with her own hands by his hand. Surprised by her actions, the young man asked what she was doing, why she grabbed his hand. In a past life, the Duchess learned self-defense in the lessons of future princesses, and now she decided to use the knowledge gained there. The brother, of course, did not know anything about this. The young man could not even imagine that he would soon expect him. Having captured his brother's hand in a strong capture, the girl decided to ask him something. She said that she knew about her brother's experiences about her absence and asked him for forgiveness. Then she said that she needed to know something from him. Her brother at first tried to say that he was not at all worried about the fact that the Duchess escaped from the house, but the girl did not listen to him and asked why he also fled so sharply then. It seemed to her that as before her father, her brother also concerned the question posed by the girl. He darkened in his face, and it seems that he was not going to answer at all. The young Duchess was interested in the moment when she, having arrived from the north, asked if she had seen the prince before. The girl wanted to check the information received from her father. Seeing that in this way she could not get anything from her brother, the girl decided to resort to action. It seems that her brother was not going to answer her. She began to twist the skin on his hand in different directions, making nettles. The shocked young man banged and said that he could not tell her anything. The girl demanded an answer from him. She needed to find out that they were hiding from her. Parabili pain, the young man informed his sister that at that time she just fell ill. It seems that he really was hurt. The young Duchess asked his brother if he told her everything. She threatened him to do even more painfully. The poor young man asked him to let go. He told his sister that everyone was scared then because her hair color began to change. After that, she also lost her memory, so no one else began to raise this topic in conversations with the girl. The girl looked at her brother and thought that he probably was not tuning to speak. But he still continued and said that at that time he left so quickly because he did not want to answer these questions. At the same time, the young man kept holding the hand, which visited the girl's capture. When the brother and sister had already gone to the house, he still asked the Duchess to better not ask all these questions of their mother. He explained this by the fact that the mother blames herself for the fact that her daughter was very ill then. The young Duchess began to ponder everything that she heard from her brother. She decided that she would no longer ask her mother because she really did not want to remind her of it. The ill-fated day came on which the dam ceremony was supposed to happen. It seems that even the sky did not want a girl to present on her. In the morning, the clouds stained in crimson tones. On the day of the award, the girl stood again at the entrance to the imperial palace. She was frightened by the very thought that next had to happen to her. No matter how hard she tried to avoid this, she was destined to participate in the ceremony again. Unlike the previous time, when the selection of the crown princesses was just beginning, this time the area in front of the imperial palace was filled with a crowd of people. Only the middle of the square was free, along which candidates could go to the door to the palace. It happened to the girl again. When the Duchess went down a little lower and closer to the crowd, she saw the people who greeted her. They shouted her name and wished her victory in the competition. The boys and girls from the common people did not restrain their emotions. Everyone shouted her name, wished her health, and become a hereditary princess. But the desires of the young Duchess this time did not coincide with the wishes of this crowd. The maid of the Duchess was struck by how the people met her mistress. She did not even try to hide her amazement about what she saw. The girl asked the mistress if she saw the same thing as she. Then she added that her mistress is very popular, but her mistress could not please all this at all. She did not expect such a technique from ordinary people. The Duchess thought that all this scares her. After all, popularity among people could cause the choice of her hereditary princess. The maid could not understand what her lady was afraid of. She thought that the reason for her fear is that people would attack her. Beniti thought it was not good. If this popularity does not go anywhere, the imperial family will not be able to ignore public opinion. Therefore, it can then easily become the bride of Karzan. The Duchess thought that she urgently needed to do something. This was her last chance to avoid deadly fate. It was necessary to save people close to her. Stepping between the screaming crowd, the young Duchess thought that she needed to make some kind of rude mistake that would destroy all her growing popularity among these people. But as for evil, in her head she had no so necessary thoughts now. The Duchess could not come up with anything. The girl, silently and in thought, continued her journey to the doors of the imperial palace. She was not up to the screams of an enthusiastic crowd, but her maid thanked everyone for his kindness to her mistress. The maid of the young mistress was glad to find herself in the spotlight. She had never felt so happy. Raising her hand high above her head, she waved it and thanked everyone for their support. The dull Duchess looked with regret at her maid. In another situation, she would laugh at her. But now she was completely out of laughing. The maid decided that her lady should take advantage of the moment and not be silent. So that no one would hear them, the maid began to roam. Tasha told her mistress that the townspeople are waiting for her to welcome them. The maid asked her mistress to wave her hand to the people greeting her. In her opinion, this would still strengthen her position. But the Duchess was inexorable and was not going to do anything. Young girls completed their passage between a noisy crowd on the street in front of the imperial palace. They entered the shadow of the house and ended up on a soft red carpet. As the previous time, everything sparkled inside the palace. The air was filled with the atmosphere of the holiday. Solemnity was in it. It seems that everything has been prepared for the selection ceremony of the crown princess. When they found themselves inside, the young Duchess finally was able to exhale with relief. She has been very tired in the few minutes that have passed since they went to the carriage and got inside the palace. At the same time, a maid girl did not feel a sense of fatigue at all. The girl who first got into the imperial palace, wide opening her mouth, examined all his decoration. She was very impressed by what she saw in front of her. The Duchess planned her actions. She knew that the award ceremony would be in the main hall. The emperor, the empress, and the girl thought that the crown prince would also have to be present there. The Duchess remembered that in her past life, the crown prince did not appear at the ceremony. With hope, she thought that perhaps he would not be there today. She would really like to hope for it. But then she remembered his words that he told her goodbye. He informed her that they would see the ceremony and asked her not to be surprised because he would look a little different. And the Duchess began to reflect. She felt somehow restless due to the fact that she did not know that she was waiting in the future. One of the servants of the Emperor indicated the Duchess and her maid where they should go. When they were in place, the maid said that this was a waiting room for candidates. Then she added that the servants would have to wait in the next near this room. When the Duchess entered the room, she immediately heard someone called her by name. She immediately recognized this voice. He belonged to a girl who once in a past life was her close friend. Rosalie grabbed her hands and said that she had heard about the girl's serious illness. Then she asked about her well-being. It seems that the girl was hard to meet with her rival. Clutching her lips, she picked up the words necessary for the answer. Having come to her senses a little, the Duchess smiled at the opponent and said that she had already had better. The girl who met the Duchess was wondering what she was sick with. Without hesitation, the Duchess replied that it was a serious cold. Both girls sat down in comfortable chairs and continued their conversation. A friend who betrayed her in a past life said that she was very glad that the Duchess is now good. Beniti thanked her for the concern. She still managed to calm down. The talkative Rosalie did not stop. She informed the girl that not only she was worried. The girl noted that her friend became very popular and all the people who gathered on the outside were worried about her. After that, the third of the rivals joined the conversation. Turning to the Duchess, she said that she had already been chosen by the Crown Princess. At least, this could be judged by the reaction gathered in front of the palace of the public. The girl continued and said that in the end they can only become girlfriends of the bride of the Crown Prince. She advised her ex-friend to the Duchess to stop deceiving herself. Rosalie in response asked why Rumina was so rude and asked her to apologize immediately. But she did not think to apologize. She again turned to her interlocutor and asked her if she still wants to become a servant of the Duchess. She said that although the girls are competitors, she should understand how she looks funny when taking the side of Beniti. The girl added that although she is rude, she does not want to hide her real feelings. The former friend of the Duchess of Rosalie asked her how she was generally going to become a princess with her character. The Duchess tried to reassure her and said that Rumina has the right to say what she thinks. A girlfriend answered her that they were not going to just listen to the rummage of this red-haired fool. It seems that in the room to wait for the candidates, a scandal was ready to erupt. But the flame of quarrels quickly went out of the already beginning to ignite when a strict countess appeared. Countess Elika entered the room for waiting and asked why she was very noisy. Of course, a grave silence immediately hoisted. The first was the girl who was the instigator of the scandal. The girl quickly greeted the woman who entered. The Countess sternly looked at 3 candidates at the hereditary princesses. Then she said that she thought it was abnormal. She did not know which of them would specifically be a hereditary princess, but abnormally, when the princess's voice was heard even in the corridor, young candidates dutifully listened to the woman who conquers them. They themselves understood that they had crossed the line. The old countess told them that she hopes that henceforth this would no longer happen again on their part. Otherwise, she will be forced to strictly punish them. The young contestants silently listened to her tirade and then bent down in a general bow. They agreed in unison with the statement of an elderly woman. Seeing that the girls had already calmed down, the countess announced to them that now they should follow her. They heard that the empress was waiting for them, and the young duchess heard the countess name the one who else awaits them in the throne room. As she suggested, the crown prince turned out to be this man. While they were on the road to the hall, the girl was thinking about why he appeared at the ceremony. The Duchess thought what wind brought him here. Really, in order to see her? The girl's thoughts were interrupted by the Duchess Countess, demanding from her not to lag behind others. When they ended up in the throne room, the Countess told His Majesty and Her Majesty that all 3 candidates arrived as a potential princess. The last Duchess entered the throne room last in the throne room, in whom, it seemed, the whole world rolled over in the eyes. Of all 3, she did not want to be in this place most of all. Reluctantly, slowly stepping, the Duchess entered her rivals in the throne room. She prepared for the worst that only could happen to her in her life. The first to greet the girls was the Emperor. He turned to them and said that he was asking them to feel calm, as at home. The Emperor proudly sat on his throne. Without a crown, he looked like an ordinary person. The man said that he was very glad to see 3 beautiful and smart candidates, one of whom will soon become his daughter. In law. Hearing these words, the Empress laughed and told her husband that he seemed to hurry a little with his own words. The potential bride of the crown prince will still have a couple of years of study. In response, the emperor, who was in an excellent mood, also laughed. He said that he probably hurried because of his good mood. The empress turned to 3 contestants and asked them to come a little closer to the imperial family. The girls approached them, leaned over, and asked God out loud to bless His Majesty and His Highness. A crown prince was sitting next to his parents on the throne. It might seem that the young man was a little bored during the ceremony, but it was deceptive. He was busy observing one of the contestants. Beniti noticed that the prince was watching her intently. She was unpleasant for her attention to her modest person. She did not want to see the prince at this event at all. Then the emperor took the word again. His Majesty said that he heard that Miss Beniti was seriously ill. He asked the girl how she feels now. The Duchess replied that she thanks the emperor for anxiety, and she added that she had already recovered. The emperor said that he was very pleased with this news. He noted that the girl looks healthy and wished all the contestants to health. Then the Duchess heard a voice that also turned to her with a question. The girl was not ready now for the questions of this person. The one whom she did not want to see at the ceremony asked the girl what exactly she was ill. The Duchess was not ready to answer immediately the question. She generally hoped not to see the crown prince here. The fact that he would ask her questions and there could be no question. The girl had the feeling that the prince decided to mock her. The Duchess smiled and replied that she had a cold. The crown prince smiled slyly to her words. He once again asked if she really had a cold. The girl looked sadly into the eyes of a young man. She herself could not understand now whether she had a cold or not. Perhaps it was something else. The Duchess once again confirmed her and father the version that she was sick all this time. The young Duchess was ready to fall through the ground. She just made unthinkable. The girl realized that she had just lied to all 3 members of the imperial family. The crown prince still did not let up with his questions. He decided to ask the girl, was she really so ill that she could not attend the ceremony? From the indignation overwhelming her, the girl bit her lip. It was difficult for her to answer the questions of a young man. The Duchess was already angry with the very presence of the crown prince at this ceremony. She thought that he really wanted to see her for this, and the young man, apparently, was only amused by the situation that developed between them. The smile nasty to the girl did not leave his face, but still, the Duchess was able to pull herself together. She smiled sweetly at the prince in response. He already knew everything about the state of her health. The Duchess remembered that then he touched her forehead to check her condition. And this is exactly what he confused the girl who did not expect from him. Beniti thought to answer the crown prince. He probably did not care because he already knew everything very well about her imaginary illness. The girl replied that she was so sick that she could not remember anything. The crown prince calmly listened to the girl's answer. It seems that he completely satisfied him, and the young Duchess also added that they say that she was very sick, even deadly. The prince only grinned in response to these words. The young man said that for someone who said that he was so sick, the girl had a very healthy complexion. So he decided to ask about her well-being. He added that he was glad that the girl recovered. The Duchess thanked the crown prince for the attention shown to her. At this time, other contestants carefully monitored everything that happened between their colleague and the crown prince. One of them tried to understand what this upstart thought again. The other had no thoughts from the emotions overwhelming her. As soon as the conversation ended, the servants carried out a casket in which 3 medallions were lying for candidates in the bride of the crown prince. Each of them was supposed to receive a pendant with the imperial coat of arms depicted on it. Thanks to this medallion, one could calmly pass to any point in their empire. And now the young Duchess held a pendant in her hand which could open any doors in this world. She could easily get rid of this jewel, if only her whole family remained unharmed. The old strict Countess announced that the ceremony will begin now. She told the girls to get ready to go out into the courtyard again. When the doors of the imperial palace opened, all 3 candidates and the brides were able to go to the courtyard for the display of the crowd gathered here. The audience, consisting of young men and girls from the common people, loudly welcomed the chosen ones of the crown prince. Voices in favor of the young Duchess were loudest. The candidates and the bride of the crown prince found themselves on the porch of the ducal palace before the eyes of the people gathered here. Behind the loud greetings of the crowd, it was barely audible. Both rivals of the Duchess were very happy to attend this ceremony. They enjoyed the moment of their celebration. For the girl, this was a time when jubilant appliances sound everywhere, and only one person doused the cold later. The Duchess urgently needed something to do something so that her popularity fell sharply. It was necessary to come up with something unusual. After all, she could not say that she could not attend the ceremony because she escaped from the house. But she still wanted to leave a bad impression of herself. The Duchess did not imagine what to do. After long thoughts, a smile appeared on the girl's face. She decided that she would definitely do this. Suddenly, the heels of the young Duchess broke away from the floor and she sharply began to lean forward. In the next instant, the Duchess flew forward with her whole body, and the rivals standing behind her watched her fall in amazement. In the crowd of people present at the ceremony, there was a sigh of disappointment and indignation. It seemed to the young Duchess that she flew in the air like a butterfly. Behind her stood still, not departing from her swift flight, other candidates in the bride of the crown prince. Both on the mouth froze a cry of horror. Flying like a butterfly, the Duchess spread on the steps of the palace like a frog. A little behind her stood unable to move two of her rivals. Beniti felt an acute pain in its palms. Then the knees began to hurt in the same way. And gradually the whole body of the girl joined them. The Duchess was very painful and insulting. From the feelings that overwhelmed her feelings, the girl began to cry loudly. Then she thought what a good plan she came up with a good plan. Two of her friends already rushed to the Duchess. It seems that even them, despite all their hostility, was not the same thing what happened to the Duchess. While two maids ran up, ready to help the Duchess to get up, she managed to think about everything. The girl decided to fall in front of everyone in order to drop her dignity of a noble lady. It seemed to her that everything turned out perfectly. Despite the tears, she was pretty herself. I didn't even forget about a light, careless cry. The girl thought that this would hardly change her image at once, but so she could change her image slowly, step by step. Water sharpens the stone. Those who looked at the ceremony in the window of the maids of candidates at the bride of the crown prince could not restrain their cries of indignation at the sight of a falling young lady. Of course, her favorite maid was most nervous. The poor maid immediately, as the opportunity appeared, ran out into the street to help her mistress. She asked the Duchess whether she was all right. The girl asked the maid not to be nervous at her account. She said that she just turned her leg, but in general, she was not so painful. When she was about to continue her story, someone distracted her, shouting by name. The stunned maid and her lady looked towards from where they called her. They found a very pretty and elegantly dressed young man. With one hand, the man held his hat shot now, and in the other behind him there was a beautiful bouquet behind him. The maid was very surprised by the appearance of an unfamiliar man. The feelings of her mistress were very difficult to understand in the words of her face. The maid immediately addressed her mistress, who this man is. She did not understand how she could know him. The young man answered the maid's question, saying that he is a friend of her mistress. Then the young man added that they met her during the trip. The talkative maid was no longer to calm down. She immediately asked the Duchess that she probably did not return home because she met such a beautiful man on a trip. The Duchess was already ready to name the girl the name of her acquaintance, but he was ahead of her and said that his name was Carr. Beniti did not understand why the young man came to her. During their conversation in the throne room, it seemed to the girl that he wanted to annoy her as much as possible. She did not understand what he was now planning. The young man turned to the maid and said that she could call him just by name. She was simply not her own from the events that took place. She was overwhelmed with emotions. Then the young man asked the maid to leave them for a long time so that he could talk to her mistress. The maid immediately agreed without hesitation. Her day was clearly a success today. At first, she went with the mistress through a crowd of admiring people, and now she also met a beautiful young man. Her mistress was of very opposite opinion. The Duchess asked the maid to not go anywhere, but that was no longer stopped. She wanted to like the young man, and for this she decided to obey him. The Duchess tried to no avail returning her maid back. She did not listen to her. Suddenly, the maid turned around, turning to a young man. She said that her lady is a candidate for the bride of His Highness of the Crown Prince. Therefore, he should not have any other intentions and feelings for her. Having a good goodbye with a hand, the girl wished the mistress and her friend a successful conversation. Then she said goodbye to them. The young Duchess mentally conjured her maid to go anywhere and stay next to her. It seems that the girl was scared of the opportunity to stay with the Crown Prince alone. While the young man looked after the retiring girl, the Duchess tried to overtake her naughty maid, but the attempt to catch up was unsuccessful. The girl only had all the ill, and to that from falling body even more. Tears appeared again in her eyes. The girl turned to the young man and asked what he wanted to tell her. He turned to her, saying that she was a nasty girl. It seems that he did it in vain. The Duchess immediately jumped to her feet, jumped to the young man and closed his mouth with her glove. The prince, whose face was the Duchess's hand, dressed in a glove, stared intently into the face of the young Duchess. Since their heads were so close to each other, she also looked into his face. A storm of feelings raged in the soul of a girl. At first, she was indignant about the young man's appeal. But then she had a feeling of euphoria from somewhere inside her. The Duchess turned to the young man. "Why do you call me that, a cursory prince?" In response, the young man asked him to call Carr when he has yellow hair color. Then he added that the girl lied very well, being escaped from the house. The Duchess looked perplexedly at the young man who was walking next to her. Continuing to walk, the young man said that he was not tolerant of seeing what shocked the people of the Empire, who are now so ardently supporting her. The Duchess asked the prince what he had in mind. She did not understand his hints. In response, the young man told her that she was now deceiving the people. On the girl's face was all the same bewilderment about the words of the prince. The young man said that he could not even imagine what will happen if her secret is revealed. The Duchess asked the prince which of the secrets he had in mind. The young man answered her that the girl, just like him, escaped from the house because she did not want to attend the ceremony. Then the prince added that his interlocutor is the most beloved by the people and in his eyes the best candidate for his wife to the crown prince. The girl thought about whether the prince decided to intimidate her. The Duchess was not clear what the prince was seeking from her. Only the worst could always be expected from him. Then the prince began to put forward his conditions for their unspoken agreement. Firstly, the Duchess is forbidden to disclose that it is transformed into this form and walks around the city. The prince crossed from foot to foot and was preparing to declare the girl the second point of their contract. According to him, when the prince did not call her, she always had to respond to his call. From the surprise of the conditions put forward by the prince, the girl was speechless for a moment. So far, he spoke only about her responsibilities. She did not understand how he was going to blackmail her. The prince approached the Duchess closer and was preparing to say the last conditions of their contract. If the girl fulfills her conditions, then the prince promised her that he would never reveal her secret before the people. It seems that having expressed all his thoughts about the conditions, the prince was preparing to hear something in response from the girl. She was in no hurry to answer and pondered what she heard from a young man. Finally, the Duchess decided to object to her interlocutor. The girl said that she agrees to the first condition. But with the second, she had doubts. She could not understand what exactly it is. The prince immediately asked the young Duchess what exactly so embarrassed her in the words of the young man. It seemed to him that he was able to argue his position with reasonably. Enraged by his condition, the young girl shouted into the face of the crown prince. Why did His Highness need to call her? She added that she would like to get an immediate answer to the question posed. The Duchess remembered how the prince reacted to her in a past life. When the girl came to him, he turned away and rejected her. Therefore, it was not clear to her why he now decided to call her to him. The young man replied that then he was quite sharp. It is not a fact that he will definitely need to call the girl to himself. Or perhaps this is not so? He added that this was just the same as they did not know that they would meet again in the wagon in which they went north. With his answer, the young man only confused the girl more. As before, she did not know anything about the goals pursued by a young man. The prince took his hat into his hands and then lifted it over his head. The Duchess heard from him that people do not know what could happen in the future. Therefore, they need to be prepared for any circumstances. Already waved her a farewell to her hat, the young man added that perhaps he would need the help of the girl again. A fire of passions broke out in the soul of the girl. A day that could end so successfully for her, for some reason turned into an incomprehensible what. Anyone would be sad in its place. The young Duchess looked sad after the departing prince. She could not tell him anything in response. The girl thought that she would never need the help of His Highness. She shouted after him the word, never. She thought that she would never let him manipulate. She will never submit to him in something. Everything will be the way she decided. But the young man did not hear her. Put his hands in the pockets of his coat, he slowly went towards the imperial palace. He was not heard after the words of a young girl. The young Duchess thought that she should leave as soon as possible the candidate's place in the bride. She thought that she would be called by a person who was more than other things to be more unhappy. What was her sense to get closer to him again? The girl just wanted to return to her place, where she would have nothing to do with the crown prince. The Duchess could not understand how everything turned upside down in this way. She was present in court in the role of the victim. All this seemed to her a phantasmagoria. Her maid now answered the questions of the judge. The girl stood behind the counter where the witnesses of the crime are responsible. Her beloved maid told the judge that she saw everything perfectly. The maid, without a doubt, continued and said that she and other people were noticeable how Miss Rumina substituted Miss Beniti. And because of this, the Duchess fell at the ceremony. The judge turned to the accused girl. Stroking his mustache, he asked her if she admitted that she had set her leg to the Duchess at the ceremony in order to fall. Sitting a leap from the judge in the courtroom, the Duchess thought, what kind of nonsense is happening here now? This completely contradicted her plans. As always, everything turned against her. The Duchess looked at the accused, sitting on the spot, her former competitor. She was sorry, this girl with red hair. It seems that she should suffer it all. Rumina, little reminiscent of the cheerful girl that she was before. It seems that this was influenced by accusations of a crime and general reproach. The young Duchess again remembered the day when she and other candidates left the door of the imperial palace. Several thousand people were present at this event, and these same thousands of people saw what actually happened. For a moment, the girl had no doubt that it was she herself decided to fall in front of this crowd, but were the accusations of her competitors fair? The girl rummaged in her head and found something there. It is possible that her fall was not so accidental. The young Duchess remembered that someone really contributed to her fall. A moment before she decided to fall, someone stepped on her shoe, and this was the current accused. The Duchess could not understand why the girl was the first to decide to substitute her footboard. In her opinion, that one should wait a bit. The Duchess decided that she had to defend the innocently accused. She asked the judge of the word and turned to all those present. At first, she thanked everyone for taking care of her health. The following words, the victim caused a murmur and discussion in the courtroom. The Duchess told the judge that she believes that the court should be fair. Therefore, she decided to declare that she really fell through her fault, and this accidentally coincided with the fact that Miss Rumina's foot was next to her. Most of the Duchess's words struck the accused itself, in the defense of which she now spoke. The girl opened her eyes wide, not understanding the essence of what was happening in the courtroom. The Duchess then turned to the judge and asked him to wisely judge that there were no innocent victims. Having bowed to the judge, the girl asked him to take note of what she told him now. She hoped for a fair trial. The words of the Duchess in the courtroom did not affect the audience at all. From the crowd, screams began to hear that it is necessary to punish the accused. There were demands to remove her from candidates in the bride. All this was very angry with the Duchess. She wanted everyone to listen to her carefully and thought properly. The girl did not want to use the mistake of her competitor. It seems that everything that was happening on this day in court greatly made fun of and amused the judge. He laughed loudly and said that this was a very strange thing. There are so many witnesses, but for some reason the victim denies everything. He was already ready to announce his sentence. But at that moment, the voice of another witness sounded, who asked the judge to wait. It turned out that the third of the candidates in the bride of the Crown Prince also wanted to testify. Rosalie boldly moved forward and went to the stand for testimony. The judge turned to her and said that the girl should be serious and balanced in her testimony. The witness immediately confirmed her readiness to do this. The judge asked her to testify, but before that, the girl had to take the oath. The witness boldly raised her right hand up. Holding this hand raised, the girl stated that she swears to tell the truth and only the truth. Standing the judge, the witness said that she clearly saw how the victim stumbles on the bandwidth of the accused. Hearing this, all the Duchess thought that she was completely screwed up again. She thought that if Rumina leaves the candidates, then she also would have to leave. Then, in the end, the place of the wife of the Crown Prince will take Rosalie. And Beniti could not just leave everything. The Duchess turned to the testing girl and told her to tell the truth and confirm that this was not the accused. Rosalie turned to her and said that she did not understand what the Duchess was talking about. She again confirmed that her testimony was true. The girl said that the victim should tell the people the truth. After all, the whole people of the Empire are worried about it. She stated that she insisted on her proposal and wants, like everyone else, to hear the truth. The young Duchess did not want to hear this, so she shut up her ears with her palms. Over time, she pushed her hand a little aside to hear what is happening in the courtroom. The Duchess's friend approached the accused girl and asked her to tell how everything was actually. According to the Duchess, the matter began to take a very bad turnover for her. Everyone knew that the Rumina family never lies, and therefore the girl herself will also not be able to lie. But in any case, she really tried to substitute a bandwagon to the Duchess. At that moment, when hot debate flared up in the courtroom, someone else entered his door, dressed in a black cloak. The Duchess still hoped that the accused simply would lie that it was not her to set her a bandwagon. The girl thought that if at least one witness was found who saw her herself fell, it seems that at that moment he decided to appear. More recently, he entered the courtroom, announced that he would also testify. The young Duchess seemed very strangely familiar. Definitely, she heard him many times before that. Turning her head towards the speaker, the girl was surprised to see a person familiar to her. When the young man threw back the hood of his black cloak, the hereditary prince of the Highness Karzan appeared to the review of all those present.